All right, King Killers. In this episode, we're covering chapters 6 through 10. I'm going to let you know about Tim's slight and gimpy stature. We compare Kote to Kvothe when he was a child in Tarbean, and we mention Kvothe's song that paints Felurian as a basic bitch. Then we're going to find out about a Kvothe and 50 Cent connection from Tim. Kvothe shows off his big brain by learning a cipher in 15 minutes, and Fitz tries to teach us about fancy new technology, like the typewriter. Finally, you'll learn about a healthy tradition in this world that I really respect, how I would tell Rothfuss to write one of my stories, our brilliant Mario Brothers and Twilight theories, and about the Rue, Abinthy, magic, and more. So sit back and enjoy.
Welcome back, Killers, to the third installment of the Utmost Killer broadcast, King Killer Podcast. Tonight, at your convenience and disposal, the show will be hosted by Dapper Dan, Tiny Tim, and the infamous Flying Fist of Ferocity, Fitz. That is me. How's it going, guys?
It's going well. I like that you're pulling it back and not bringing an over the top introduction. Like you're just being very mellow and low key with it.
Well, I thought I would, wear my
humility,
Sunday blues, so to
good.
speak, my normal everyday stuff. And since that's what everybody calls me all the time anyway, I thought, why, and you, Dapper Dan and Tiny Tim, why keep that from the listener?
Yeah, I'm okay with Dapper Dan. I'm okay with that. I don't know, like Tim, like Tiny.
What's that, a hair
like
cream?
It's for the audience, like they don't realize like Tim's like 4'9", and so
Dapper Dan is a pomade. I am
Hair
not
cream.
4'9".
Tim
Yeah,
Tim
it's a
is
pomade.
He's like 4'9", 105 pounds.
gimpy.
So we've always called him Tiny.
4'9" and gimpy.
Yeah, very very gimpy.
What's that?
Gimpy?
What is it, Tim? What's the?
It's a pomade.
No. What's Tiny? What character is Tiny Tim?
Charles Dickens, I think. Christmas
Yeah,
Carol, something
Christmas
like that.
Carol.
I knew he'd know.
And he
All
is
right,
gimpy.
well-
He has a crutch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little crutch.
I think you know what though? I think he's actually Algerian, by the way.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, he's
You'd be the one to
Algerian.
know and correct us.
Yeah,
And he's
Well,
not that
tonight-
tiny, dude.
Tiny Tim
Yeah,
Camus.
so-
Was he a big guy?
yeah.
I've known a
Yeah,
few
the,
tinies that were huge.
Yeah.
In fact, the only tinies
Yeah,
I've
dude
ever
from,
known are huge.
Dude from Friday, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 6 is called The Price of Remembering. It's early evening the following day after that at the Waystone Inn. Chronicler quickly recognizes Kote as Kvothe, and Kvothe recognizes Chronicler as the famous writer. We learn that Chronicler may have been out looking for Kvothe as he successfully coerces Kvothe to relay his story and to allow Chronicler to write it. So what do you guys think?
First off, you get Chronicler when he comes down. He's been knocked out. He's one of the first things he says is, "Are we in Noir?" Kote, nods. He's like, "Yeah, you're in the middle of a Noir," which is interesting because the place that he chose to hide is called Noir, and he's in the middle of Noir, which is very similar to the middle of nowhere. So it's kind of a little clever writing by Rothfuss that he builds a city in, and it's called Noir, and Kvothe is hiding in the middle of nowhere. And we don't know, through the two books, we have no idea where Noir is. It's not a given exactly where this place is located, so we don't actually know, where he is on the map, like where he is in relation to other cities and other places that we see. So he's, in fact, in the middle of nowhere.
It definitely seems to be the case, given that they have very few patrons, if any at all. And when they do have them, it's always like, surprisingly enough, there's actually people in the Waystone Inn, which is rare.
Yeah,
Yeah, and-
for sure. And like, what are the, once Chronicler acknowledges that he knows who Kvothe is, and he's blown away that he just ran into him. And Kvothe kind of like pulls back and like, hold on, before you fucking start running your mouth. He's like, who are you, and everything along those lines. But Chronicler's like, hey, and I'm not here to cause trouble, mind you. I'm not here because of the price on your head. So the big aspect there is we learn that there is a price on Kvothe's head. So it's not just that he's hiding. There's people that have put a price on his head and are willing to pay good money to have this dude killed.
What does when Kvothe asked Chronicler something right there at the beginning? He says, "How's the road to somewhere?"
Anyway.
Like he's catching him in a lie or something.
I think it's an idiom. It's a common phrase, and I think it's like a polite way to start a conversation with a stranger in their world.
Why is Chronicler so
he wasn't trying to catch him in a lie. Yeah, it's just a common idiom. How's the road to Tinuay? It's mentioned also like right before Kvothe's about to be whipped for the first time. He's talking to Will, and Will's like, "So why do people keep asking me how the road is to Tinuay? Or how the road is to Tinuay?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm not on the road. Whatever." And Kvothe's like, it's just an idiom. It's basically like, how are things going? And he's like, "How are things going?" That's an idiom. He's like, your language makes no sense. And
I like that. Yeah.
And so it's just an idiom. How are things? Basically, how are the roads? That kind of thing. There wasn't any aspect to that. Before we get go past it though, as far as like there being a price on his head, I think the big thing is who's got a price on his head, and that could be anyone from. I think the big suspects would be Ambrose or his father. Could be like Mayor Alvaron, or maybe King Roderick, or maybe like the Talon Church. But I think someone in that vein is probably the ones who've got a price on his head that are paying money to have him killed.
I thought it was interesting that when Chronicler said that, he looked up at the sword, and then his expression changed. And he was like, "Whoa, I'm not here to cause any trouble." And that's when he mentioned it. So to me and we talked about that last episode where, clearly something went down. It feels like the sword was involved in a story that has caused him to obtain notoriety and infamy. And I would say that's whatever that source is, whatever, what happened, where it happened, the sword was involved, Kvothe was involved. There's a price on his head for the ramifications of what he did.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I don't know who it is.
I would imagine that. See, like one of the things I think is more than likely going to happen is I think Kvothe's going to kill Ambrose, and I think that is going to set in motion the price being on his head. I would think it would be someone like his dad. It could also, though, be, he's Kvothe the king killer, so it could also be that, him killing a king has put the price on his head. So, that's why it could be anybody from, Ambrose to Ambrose's father to the Mayor Alvaron to the king. Like, there's a number of people it could be, but it's interesting that there is a price on his head because it's clearly that he has done something to some very powerful people, and he's put himself in a position where now he's very much in danger of being hunted down and killed.
Yeah, and Chronicler alludes to a lot of the things that could have happened, a lot of things we're looking for answers for in this chapter, just goading Kote into telling his story and admitting that he's Kvothe.
Yeah, he utilizes it, and the confusion that the world has about whether you're good or bad. And Kvothe's like, "I'm both," but I mean, we'll get to that. But yeah, it's interesting how he leverages that confusion to get Kvothe to sort of set the truth, or at least tell his version of the truth.
Yeah, and we also get that as far as like Chronicler, one of those cool parts where Rothfuss kind of lays the groundwork for something he's going to build on later on. We learn when Kvothe recognizes his name, he's like, "Oh, you wrote the mating habits of the common Dracus," and he's like, that was quite the thing for a young man to learn that dragons don't exist, and obviously that book comes into play in one of the cooler moments of book one towards the end when he goes to Tarbean and ends up killing the Dracus. So he right here in chapter 6, he begins the groundwork that he lays for the mating habits of the common Dracus, and then eventually you get to the end of the book, and if there's a few more mentions, like you get when he gets to the university, he reads the book. It's one of the first books he reads. And so it lays that groundwork for what he's going to do at the end of the book as far as killing the Dracus.
So my impression of Chronicler at this point is like he's a world-renowned writer. Like, is he, tells him who he is, and Kvothe says, "Wait a minute, you can't be." And then he realizes you are not a chronicler; you're the chronicler. Like, is Chronicler like some world-renowned writer? And if so, it seemed like he said, "I know your book and not books." That all he knows him for is the common habit, the mating habits.
Yeah, it was interesting how he said the great debunker himself, and clearly that phrase of not just a chronicler, the chronicler, is a very smart way for Rothfuss to throw that in there, where it's that shows he's got a lot of notoriety. And the way we hear about the book, The Mating Habits of the Common Dracus, there's a reputation, there's like a fame enthralled there, and then we find that over time too. I mean, he's quite well known, and then we hear about that more, like these other biographies he's doing about people. But yeah, I mean, it's quite. It again, we learn about how big a deal Kvothe is, right? This guy's searching him out, So it keeps building and building how how big these two characters are to this world.
Yeah, for sure. And Chronicler, I mean, he's obviously written way more than that one book. He's written the history of Orrin Velseter, and when they talk about later on, is it uncommon for someone to need 3 days? Like, it's not like this is the second autobiography that he's written. Like, he's clearly done this many, many times, because that's why he's like, yes, it's very uncommon. So he's clear. He's a writer of great renown. Like, people know who he is as a writer. So it's not just one book. He's written obviously quite a bit. He's described by Kvothe as the great debunker. You don't get that kind of notoriety just based off of one book. He's clearly a major writer in this world.
Yeah. So, and then we also get this relationship between, so because he mentions, Chronicler mentions, we heard a rumor, and then, well, I guess Kote jumps at that, and he's like, "We? Who's we?" And then that's the first time we hear about Scarpy.
You got a mouse in your pocket?
Huh?
He says, "Who's we? You got a mouse?"
Yeah.
It's never mind.
It's a common it's a common joke when people say like "we" and you're like, "Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket?" You've never heard that expression? Yeah, it's a common expression. It's basically saying like "Who's we? I'm not part of your we. Like, why are you including me in this?" It's like, you got a mouse in your pocket.
Like we got to get all this work done. Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket? That's the vein. In that vein. Yeah. Anyway,
something a joke would say. Okay, cool.
Yeah, something a joke would say. Yeah. And then we get that Chronicler is kind of teamed up with Scarpy, which leads back to what we talked about last episode as far as Scarpy possibly being a member of the Amyr, Chronicler possibly either being a member of the Amyr or working unwittingly for the Amyr. But like one of the things, like I wanted to bring up that we didn't really talk about and dive into last time was when we talk about this distinction between Kote versus Kvothe. One of the things we should talk about is that when his parents are killed in 10 chapters or so, and then he goes into the woods after it and is by himself, he talks about like there's 4 doors that your mind uses to escape painful moments. So you got like the doors of sleep, the doors of forgetting, the doors of madness, and the doors of death. So you use all these 4 doors. They're different ways for your mind to kind of escape pain. And so when Kote, his family, is killed, he locks a huge portion of his mind behind the doors of forgetting. Like when he's in Tarbean, he's not thinking about his parents. He's not thinking about what happened to them. He's not thinking about his past at all. He doesn't think about Abinthy and all the lessons he learned from them. He is just purely this wild child acting on instinct, and he's not trying to access his memories. He's just walled them off to the point that even if something reminds him of his family, he immediately pulls back from it and pushes it all back down. So he's locked his mind behind the doors of forgetting after his family gets killed, and it takes Scarpy to wake him up. When Scarpy tells the 2 stories to him, and then Scarpy possibly names him when he says his name, Kvothe, and possibly names him, that is what it takes to wake him up. So moving back to this position he is in now as Kote, it's very similar. It seems like he is pushing down memories anytime, like there's moments where you get flashes of Kvothe, but then as soon as he kind of recognizes that he's being himself again, he pushes that shit back down. So it seems like it's a very similar thing. Maybe not exactly that he's locking himself down behind the doors of forgetting, because he obviously tells his story and he remembers it and he's willing to tell it. So it's not exactly the same thing, but it's a very similar aspect to his time in Tarbean to his time in the bar right now.
So Dan, is there? I'm a little confused about it, and I know we're getting ready to start talking about Alar and Abinthy. Is there any similarities between his forgetfulness and Alar itself? Like, I don't mean his forgetfulness. I mean when he's locking himself behind doors, or that he is, forgetting things. Is there any similarities there? What he's done now, could that be due to him splitting his mind?
That's kind of interesting. So you're basically saying the strength of his Alar would be like the strength to choose to lock away pieces of himself.
Yeah, like can he do it on purpose?
That's interesting. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting way to consider that.
It could be. It could be that he's locked things that make him who he is. He's locked them behind doors through his Alar that he can't access, that he's unwilling to access, to allow himself to access. So yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between his time in Tarbean, but the huge difference is when he's in Tarbean, it doesn't seem like he is able to access his memories. Like they even just come to the forefront a little bit. He pulls away like putting a hand on a hot stove. And here, like when he's talking to Chronicler, he doesn't want to tell the stories, but it seems like they're still fresh in his mind. Like, I mean, you can see the pain, the anguish on his face is described in this chapter when he's even just thinking about what happened. So it doesn't seem like he's necessarily like completely locked everything behind the doors of forgetting. It seems a little different, that maybe he's, like we talked about, like maybe he locked his name in his chest, his thrice locked chest. Or maybe there's something wrong with his Alar. Maybe like the Seek the Stone thing, he's hiding something from himself, that he just can't access who he is. But there's similarities in the fact that he's not himself, and he's either intentionally or unintentionally preventing himself from being able to become who he is. He's not able to become who he is.
There's definitely pieces because he can't use his sympathy even when he tries. He doesn't sing, and we know when he doesn't have his music throughout the books, it's very detrimental to him. Like he loses a piece of himself. So it's almost like could also be his mind and his own self could be in like what's that called when you're like in deep, when someone's in a coma and they come out of it, their bodies and I can't think of the
Atrophy.
word. Yeah, it's like his mind and self is like atrophied. And it does seem it's by an event of something he did, but then it also seems to be like he made this choice. He chose the middle in noir, right? So that seems to also have been intentional. So again, it's a really interesting thing to speculate on.
Yeah,
I'll continue on that same point, Tim. It's like the old question: can God create a rock that's too big for him to pick up, right? So in the same way, can his alar be so strong that he cuts himself off enough that he can't bring himself back? You see what I'm saying? Is his alar so strong that he has completely shut, because the pain was so hard, like it was after his family died. And at that point he had been with Ben for a while and learned how to play those games where he, locked himself out of his own mind. So is that, has he done that here? And is that why he can't?
It's interesting too, because it's a way to survive, right? I mean, that's what he does in that state in Tarbean. And then eventually he needs to get out of it. And this whole thing started with what Dan was saying is that he needed Scarpy to wake him up. So hopefully, and maybe what we're seeing now, we talked about this on the last episode, maybe that's what Chronicler is. Maybe that's what he's there for. He's there to have Kvothe tell his own story to shake himself out of it, to possibly wake himself up, which is clearly what Bast is trying to have happen as well. Because he's trying to get him, shaken out of this as well. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of different parts to it because as Dan said too, he could be playing Seek the Stone to a degree, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about, is maybe he's done this to himself and he doesn't even remember he did it to himself. Or he doesn't know his own way out, right? I think there is something definitely to the box as well. There's a lot of these questions, these enigmatic sort of puzzles that are left for us to try to disentangle and figure out.
Yeah, and you have like a Loden when he panics when Kvothe asks him the question about like what would you say about someone who constantly changes their name, and Loden panics over that, and so I think that is probably put in there because that explains that Kvothe changing his name to Kote is not just simply taking on a different calling name. That he changed his name. Like in the story, names are obviously way more. Naming is way more powerful than just calling names. I don't think he just changed his calling name. I think he changed his name. If that makes sense.
No, that's interesting because within this set of chapters, we're starting to get that groundwork laid of the importance of names. It's mentioned, it's like sort of peppered in and layered pretty subtly initially, but it's that repetition. Once you read Rothfuss enough, you start to realize the repetition itself is about as heavy-handed as it's going to get a lot of times with some of these things. And he does mention it quite a bit in this set of 3-4 chapters, where he's saying things like just things about naming. We'll get to it, but yeah, there's definitely something to that. That's insinuated for sure.
Yeah, it's extremely obviously one of the most confusing aspects of the book when you go through your first read is his time in Tarbean, his time in the bar, because he does not seem like himself at all in either of those situations. It's very confusing until you start looking at it and you step back and you're like, shit, maybe it's not just he wasn't able to deal with trauma for 3 years. Maybe it's that there was something preventing him from accessing who he was and being himself for 3 years in Tarbean. And maybe there's something that is preventing him from being able to open his box, to be able to use sympathy, or to be able to use the adhere skills that he learned. Once you start realizing, like, the shit that happened to him in Tarbean, that wasn't just trauma, that there was something else going on, then it starts to make more sense about what's going on in these early chapters with him as Kote. And then, every time we go back into the frame and all the interludes, and when he can't use his sympathy and stuff, it makes more sense when you pair it with what happened to him in Tarbean.
And when you say that, you mean that it's not just trauma. You're saying that, whether it be because of the trauma or added to the trauma, was he's behind the doors of forgetfulness.
Yes.
I'm just trying to...
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Well, trauma delivered him into, right? Delivered him behind the doors, or sent him behind the doors.
But when you compare it to like our world, though, like, if someone has a traumatic experience, they might push some memories down, but like, it's different though. This is like, he doesn't have access to his magical abilities, so it's different in this world because there is magic involved, and so it would be more. It's clearly more powerful than just, I don't remember. Like, he doesn't have access to any of his abilities, even if he wants them.
And it's to further your point, it's his abilities are. Some of his abilities are innate. We learn that obviously throughout the rest of the story when certain things happen. But when you can tell he has no control over these things, but all of a sudden he breaks that bottle a little bit later in this chapter. And I don't think he does that on purpose, because there's a lot of things that if he can do that, there are, a lot of times where he should be, messing people up or snapping out of it, so to speak. And you see it, as his anger flares, or, as he gets passionate about something, like we said last chapter when he's singing, his hair lights on fire and his eyes glow, and that may be an exaggeration, but that's portrayed anyway.
Yeah, it seems like he wants to access his abilities and he can't, and it frustrates him. So it's not just trauma. The shit that's going on with him as Kote, it's not just trauma. Like, he wants to be able to open that box. He wants to be able to set that guy on fire. He wants to be able to use his adhere fighting skills, but he can't. So it's more than just trauma. It's a part of this world. There is aspects of this world, and naming and alar and, hiding things behind boxes and that kind of stuff. There's something to all of that.
It's pretty great. Because it does kind of connect to our world in the sense that when people do go through trauma, they do shut themselves off, and some of their innate abilities do become muted. So there seems to be some type of psychological, Rothfuss is tapping into very human traits throughout. It's great. I mean, obviously it's further emphasized by the fact that he has magical powers, and those are muted, and he has all these acquired abilities over time, and we know so well, through rereads, we know so well what he's capable of, and the fact that those powers and those abilities are muted is saying a tremendous amount. It's saying a lot, right? So, but it's great because what he does give us through Tarbean and what he gives us here and with those doors, you start to realize there is that interconnectedness, and we clearly have to speculate of what has happened that's put him in this place.
Well, and I'll further what you said again, Tim. That those innate feelings or abilities that get muted when you go through a trauma. Anybody who's been through a trauma, it's something. There are things that you wish you could just get over or forget about, or and again, sometimes you do forget about those things without any trying. Your mind locks those memories away on purpose, and I'm talking about real life trauma. It's true to life is what I'm getting at. As far as abilities go, I don't know. Maybe there could be some example that would work out there. But what I'm saying is there are literally, you lock things away behind the doors of remembering. And I think you said madness is one. Absolutely, those things happen in real life trauma.
Rothfuss spells it out for you that things are different, but he does it very subtly, where he's like, Kote shook his head. It was a long time ago. Not even 2 years, Chronicler protested, and I am not what I was, Kote continued without pausing. What was that exactly? Kvothe, he said, simply refusing to be drawn in any further into an explanation. Now I am Kote. I tend my inn. That means beers 3 shims and a private room costs copper. And he's like, as you said, done is done. The stories will take care of themselves. But you get that I am not who I was. The first time you go through that, you don't take that literally. But I think, when you go through the second time and you kind of understand that there is something different, it's literally, he is not who he was. Because he can't even do the things that he wants to do. When he wants to set the dude on, the skin dancer on fire, he's not able to use his sympathy. When he wants to use his ADM fighting skills, he's not able to do it. So he is literally not who he was, not just figuratively.
Yeah. It's I just wanted to mention it's it's a really bold way for an author to start a book. And it's kind of taking us back even to the beginning, but to start like with the main character in the doldrums, you know what I mean? In like a depressed state. But it works so well, man. I mean, because it builds everything in such an interesting way, and because he's such a interesting, heroic, accomplished figure, to start him out with all of that gone it's a pretty bold move, but it rewards the reader in such a great way. Yeah, it's awesome.
I'll tell you what. It's a solace for me. I'm assuming at this point that this is going to be a tragedy, and I hate tragedies. Obviously, when you read a story and you got a hero and you think things are going to be great, and then all of a sudden, and at the end, it ends up being a tragedy. At least this is laying it on real thick right at the beginning. Like, this is beyond foreshadowing. He's like, all right, Kvothe's waiting to die, and he screwed everything up. The fact is, it's a tragedy. He's putting it right out there right at the beginning, so you won't be let down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's in your face. I mean, you definitely get the sense that bad times are ahead.
But that's what's so great about it, because everything builds to, okay, so what the hell happened? And that's what we speculate on. Because it's so what does actually happen because of everything that he does, everything that he accomplishes, everybody he runs into, all these great experiences, and we don't know. I mean, well, we're immediately hit with severe tragedy, but he overcomes all that shit. But then he does something that apparently is like almost just as bad, maybe worse.
Yeah, and you get the timeline here, because Chronicler's like not even 2 years. So, like at the end of book 2, like when he's telling his story, he's around like 17, 18. And so the culminating event that we're going to come to in book 3, where everything falls apart, it's happened, less than 2 years ago from where he is at the bar. So, from 18 to, around 23. So within 4, 5, 6 years, shit's about to fucking go haywire for him.
So book 3 is going to be or at least the story part that Kvothe is telling in book 3 is actually going to be a lot, well, not longer, but longer than I expected, I guess. I wasn't thinking it's actually going to take 5 or 6 years. That's something I hadn't considered.
Yeah, there's definitely got to be some years. And now, obviously, the fact that you could go into the Fae and years could pass, that throws a little fucking wrench in being able to predict it exactly. But something along those lines, like 5-6 years in the world has to pass. How many years pass for Kvothe, who knows? But yeah, there's got to be some. He's got to cover some distance as far as years in the world in book 3. So he's probably going to, skip over. I don't think it will be quite. But I mean, he does that in book 1. He starts out, he's 11 years old. By the end of book 1, he's like fucking 15. So 4 years go by in book 1. So who knows? Who knows
and
how it's going to work?
4 years in book 2,
yeah.
right?
Like 2-3 years in book 2. So yeah.
Okay.
So that sounds about right. But then you get Chronicler trying to pull the story out of him, and one of the first things he's like, "Everyone thinks you're dead," and you don't get it, do you? Kote shook his head, stuck between amusement and exasperation. That's the whole point. People don't look for you when you're dead. Old enemies don't try to settle scores. People don't come asking for your stories. And yet other people say you're a myth. I am a myth, Kote said easily, making an extravagant gesture. A very special kind of myth that creates itself. The best lies about me are the ones I told. Which is great because when you're going into it, you learn like how much of the myth of Kvothe was built off of bullshit stories that he started fucking peppering in to just kind of build up his reputation, to build this fear of invincibility, or this aura of like, you just don't fuck with this dude, he's crazy.
Well, yeah, it doesn't work without the actual tangible, evident accomplishments that he does do right in front of people. The things that he does actually end up doing are impressive. The embellishments are also genius because, I mean, we get the groundwork laid here with his parents and how he learns stories and appreciates words and stories. So he also knows how to tell a story. Yeah, man, he's a beast. Man, when you kind of piece all these things together to be able to create, I mean, how do you even describe that? I mean, to be able to create the mystique around himself, I mean, he couldn't be better put together for that.
Yeah, and at this point, not the mystique, but the stories that he might be dead or not able to be found. It's keeping him safe. So his ability to, or at least his learned ability to, embellish those stories and make people believe one thing about him is paying off for him right now as he's in hiding.
Yeah, and you get some stories paint you as little more than a red-handed killer. I am that too. Kote turned to polish the counter behind the bar. He shrugged again, not as easily as before. Killed men and things that were more than men. Every one of them deserved it. So that's obviously a big clue. We've seen him kill a number of men in the 2 books, but we have not seen him kill something that were more than men, unless you like describe the Dracus as something that was more than a man. But that seems a weird thing to say he's more than a man. So it seems like that he kills a very powerful creature in this world, like a Felurian type. I don't think he kills Felurian, but someone of that nature that is very powerful.
Yeah, doesn't he? He goes in to say that he kills a god or something like that, right?
Not a god. It says he'll go. Chronicler will say in his head. It's gonna come up here in a second, but this is the face of a man who's tricked a demon to get his heart's desire and had to fight an angel to keep it. This is the face of a man who's out to kill an angel, something along those lines. But yeah, so it sounds like when he's talking about he's killed things that are more than men, that he's had to either kill an angel or something along those lines.
Before we go there, if you don't mind, not to skip over it, some are even saying that there is a new Chandrian, a fresh terror in the night. His hair is red as the blood he spills. Now, Kvothe Kvothe or Kote does say the important people know the difference, as if he were trying to convince himself, but his voice was weary and despairing without conviction. It's really that line about the new Chandrian that's big. That's like, okay, so what, in terms of like speculation, what that really hints at the possibility of, what did he do? What would he have to do to say that, for someone to suggest that he's a new Chandrian? Does that mean he killed one of the 7? Does that mean, well, he killed an angel? Does that, what did the Chandrian do?
From what the stories we learn later, like the Chandrian been around forever. Why would, what could possibly, and I'm just throwing this out as a hypothetical, as an honest question, what could he possibly do to make himself become a Chandrian?
Well, so there's 2 things that could be happening here. One, Chronicler's trying to get him to tell a story. So he knows, if he knows quite a bit about Kvothe clearly. So he could be taking it pretty far to try to say, if Kvothe's biggest enemy is the Chandrian, then let me speculate that maybe that's who he is. Or he could be suggesting he did something so awful that people think there's a new Chandrian. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. That's sort of like Fitz, like, not on the show, but Fitz has talked about, like, with just me and Tim, is a possibility that Kvothe is going to be an anti-hero, more like an enemy or a villain. And yeah, I think that's that fact that he's described as a possible, people describe him as a new Chandrian, lends some evidence to the fact that he's at least perceived as going bad.
Yeah, there's little hints. There's little things that I can take as maybe this means, and so that's why him as the anti-hero, kind of just a sense that I get, and me and Tim will argue about it, that he's a flawed hero, and that makes the best heroes, and I agree with that. But it's just the questions, like little hints like that, make me really question his what his arc's gonna end up being.
Yeah, it definitely raises your eyebrows, like the fact that there are people that think he's a new Chandrian. So clearly he's done something that would at least lead people to believe that what he did was just pure evil, or that what he did is forcing him to join the Chandrian, something along those lines, or that now he has to become pure evil.
And along those lines of people thinking he's pure evil, we get a sense in this world that is very superstitious, and couple that with the fact that all the different stories that surround Kvothe. If something were to happen where he did something, which we know is going to happen, something, call it astronomical, something huge happens, that people in that world would be prone to say he's a Chandrian. That's my point.
Yeah, it's definitely a reason, and I think, I don't think he's necessarily going to become a Chandrian, but I think there's going to be reason that people would say that. I think there will be something that's clear that, like, okay, that's why they would say he's became a Chandrian, because he did this, and this was, this is clearly. I don't think he's going to do something just evil or bad, but I think that it could be interpreted that way. I think it'll be you'll be easily able to interpret it in a way where it was just something that was pure evil. If you're coming from an outside perspective and you don't know exactly why he did what he did and exactly what he did, I think there'll be something to that.
I think that's also hinted at, or sort of alluded to, where Kvothe's response is, the important people know the difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think you're right about that. It's I mean, on rereads, it really jumps out at you. We're like, well, Jesus. So what could have happened here? You know. But I mean, Chronicler uses it. He uses it. He coerces him in a really really great way, where he's just keeps pulling him, and saying, "Look, man, you know what rumor can do. What role is going to be remembered for you? What label is going to be remembered?" And that's what he's kind of pitting Kvothe against himself. Yeah.
So you guys are
It's cool dialogue.
You guys are just goading me a little bit here, so I'm going to go ahead and say, could it be that could it be that Lanray's stories and all the stories around him could mirror the same kind of misinformation or whatever it is that makes people think that Kvothe may be a Chandrian, but that maybe the same thing had happened to Lanray? That's all kind of a dark, not a lot of explanation there of what happened in that story, and all of a sudden on the other side he comes out Haliax.
Well, I mean, I guess Dennis' song sort of hints that, right?
Oh yeah.
Some people look at him as a hero, so others look at him as he's the villain. So I mean, it speaks to what happens in history. I mean, right? Was this the old saying that the winners make the history or whatever? I don't know. Can't think of
the history
right now. History's written by the winners, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it could be. Then the next thing we move into though is Denna. So we get, some people say there was a woman, and Kvothe's like, what do they know? What do they know about what happened? He spoke so softly that Chronicler had to hold his breath to hear. They say she. Chronicler's words stuck in his suddenly dry throat as the room grew unnaturally quiet. Kote stood with his back to the room, a stillness in his body and a terrible silence clenched between his teeth. His right hand, tangled in a clean white cloth, made a slow fist. 8 inches away, a bottle shattered. The smell of strawberries filled the air alongside the sound of splintering glass. A small noise inside, so great a stillness, but it was enough. Enough to break the silence into small, sharp slivers. Chronicler felt himself go cold as he suddenly realized what a dangerous game he was playing. So this is the difference between telling a story and being in one, he thought, numbly the fear. So there's a couple things on that. One, it tells us that something fucked up happens with him and Denna. Could be she dies, could be she betrays him, could be that he does something fucked up to her. He has to sacrifice her or fuck her over in some way for something. Something bad happens in their relationship, much worse than anything we've seen so far, because it's clearly extremely painful. Also, though, he breaks that glass, or it appears that he broke that glass, and it's strawberry wine, her favorite wine. Which is interesting because he doesn't have access to his sympathy. So, is that his sleeping mind? And, is that a latent naming ability that he doesn't have access to when he wants it? But in that just intense moment where he's just feeling that intense anger or anguish, that he breaks the bottle without even fucking thinking about it or trying.
This is the only time in the interlude chapters that happens, right?
Yes.
Okay. It reminds me of Ambrose getting his arm broken, right?
Yeah.
When he names the wind in intense frickin' anger. It reminds me of that. And and when you say anguish, I mean, as the chapter continues, or just the next paragraph, like his face, he's just like absolute pain. He's like haunted and all this stuff. That's saying a lot in terms of he still has these abilities. He still has this power. It's still innate and within him, even if he's checked. And clearly it's that he still has that intense. So that's why I brought up the situation with Ambrose, because he wasn't consciously naming the wind. It came out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also that of all the goading that Chronicler does, of trying to get him to, I think he's trying to get him to say, hey, yes, you can write my story. And he's saying these little things, people think you're dead, people think this and that. this is the one point that makes Kvothe go snap and just, get pissed off enough to really change his mood and start to lean on the side of, all right, I'll tell you the story.
Well, this is the one time that Chronicler actually gets scared as well.
Yeah.
I mean, well, except for the beginning where he's like, "Hey, man, I'm not here to make trouble," but he's goading him and pushing him and pushing him, and then he actually, I love that too, man. Like, because this is a guy that's written other people's stories, where he's like, "Oh, so this is the experience he's had out of all these things he's written. This is the difference between telling one and being in one," and he's just like, "Yeah, I like that. I like that." Old Patty here puts us in that position. It's a cool little moment.
Yeah, if you're talking to someone and you piss them off, and then a bottle shatters to his right, you're gonna be like, "All right, maybe this ain't the guy. Maybe this ain't my day. Maybe this is not the person I should be fucking with."
Not just that, he knows his story. He knows everything else this guy's done, man. Like calling lightning and jeez, man.
It makes me think, though, that whatever happens in book 3, and this is an obvious thing, but that it's because of Dinah.
She plays a big part in it. Clearly,
I think it's got to have everything to do with her. I think just the way he reacts
I wouldn't
to it.
Say I wouldn't say everything. I think there's going to be some aspects I'll bring up in the next episode on one of my big theories of the books, but I wouldn't say everything, but yeah, she's clearly got to play a central role.
Yeah, no question about it.
Well, sorry, I was just going to say, when I was talking about his face and how haunted he looked and all that, that's where Chronicler goes on to describe, this is the face of a man who's, killed an angel. That's intense, man.
Yeah.
That's super, super intense.
Yeah, and it makes you curious, like, did he kill an angel? If he did, who was the angel? Like, I mean, obviously, we know Telu is an angel, and we get a number of different other ones named, but did he actually kill an angel? Or when they're talking about, like, because we know how these stories go, is it when they say he tricked a demon and he killed an angel, did he actually trick someone that they're misinterpreting to be a demon, and that he killed someone that they're misinterpreting to be an angel? Is the true story less dramatic than the actual truth? It could be that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that is weaved throughout. He definitely consistently weaves throughout, like, they're close. Like, a lot of times, Kvothe's like, he hears the story, he's like, they're close to the truth. Not exactly, but close. I mean, and that's how reality is, man. People get close to the truth, and as long as you get, like, some bullet points right, that's what lasts. I mean, what's the annoying guy in the bar? Old Cobb?
Cobb, yeah.
Yeah, that's Old Cobb. That's his whole thing, man.
Yeah, he's constantly butchering stories.
It's you guys ever seen that movie Big Fish?
No.
It's an excellent film.
Yeah.
You guys, basically, there's a lot of different stories that this guy's dad tells, and he thinks they're all lies. Well, then it ends up that, they were lies, but they're really just exaggerations to tell a good story.
Yeah. There's a lot of that aspect in this. It could be, there's also aspects of the story. He does meet Felurian. It's not an exaggeration. He meets Felurian, he escapes her with his sanity. So he does meet the Chandrian. The Chandrian do kill his family. There are aspects to the story that are true and are wild. So it could be that he does trick a literal demon and he does kill a literal angel. It's just there's enough in there that wasn't true and that was exaggerated that you just don't know for sure whether it's one or the other.
Dan, Kvothe is telling all these stories, though. They could all be lies. There could be no such thing as any magic in this world. No Felurian, no Fae. It's just Kvothe telling these great stories.
Jeez. Well, what's really
Bast.
great...
Bast would throw a huge wrench in that, because we do see Bast has cloven feet, and he knows who these people are. I
Well-
think the
Well, maybe
fact that
just
Bast exists throws a wrench in that one.
Well, what's also very, very important that makes this all work too is his father and Kvothe both repeatedly talk about how you have to bend the truth a little bit or it's not even believable. I mean, especially when he comes back from the Fae, he can't just tell them about everything that happened with Felurian. They won't believe any of it. So he has to bend the truth just a little bit to make it more believable, which is wild. But again, and that's so important because that layers these books with that otherworldly feeling where we are ensconced in this world, and there are these stories that last throughout, and we know we are built to realize that not all of it's true, but enough of it is. You know what I mean? Like, you accept enough to, well, and also you don't have a fucking choice, right? Because all of it's all we have, right? So what is given to us is what we have to work from. But yeah, it's great, man. It's very artfully done. Yeah, it's awesome.
And you get the great line like after that moment about the face of a man who killed an angel, is he's like, what do they know? And he's like, oh, they're basically, Chronicler tells him they're gonna believe what story spreads.
Yeah.
So whatever they're out there telling, like, that story's whatever story spreads, that's the one that's gonna be known as the truth. And Kvothe is like, he's like, you'd use my own best trick against me. You'd hold my story a hostage, which is classic because that's what he does to Felurian.
Yes, but when I read this Chronicler, being in sales, he kills it, man. He closes them with only what you're told. What do they know anyway? Only what they're told. It's like, ooh, got him. He got it. That was the closing remark where he nailed it.
Yeah, it's so great because he uses that, and he uses it in a hilarious way against Felurian, because it's not only like he just withholds the story. He's like, he writes the way he withholds the story from her is he writes a song about her, and he sings all these different songs, and like she gets her real into his music and everything, and then he's like, hey, look, I wrote one for you too. After he's like built up all these songs about her and like showed her all these music that she's loving, and then he's like, he sings a song where then he describes her as like this just basic bitch that is just like
she's nice,
fucking
she's
like,
nice,
like, hey, sex with you was okay, wasn't bad,
good.
I give you a thumbs up. And she's like, what the fuck did you just say? And he's like, what? I've never had sex before. And so he like just fucking tears at her ego, and that ends tremendous. Up, saving his life, and gets him his escape, is he just fucking tears at her ego by sitting there describing sex with her as just being like, yeah, it's decent, not bad. I'd ride that ride again. It's like, yeah, it wasn't too bad. It's hilarious.
It's so great. And actually the way he does it too is he plays a bunch of songs about her, but then he slowly plays songs that really aren't that good. Like he doesn't think are really that good, but so he's like kind of building it towards. It's fucking great. Yeah,
it's hilarious, and they're very similar. They both, like Felurian and Kvothe, in this moment, their ego is what eats at them. Even Kvothe, knowing what Chronicler is trying to do, still can't resist. He still has to he still wants to tell his story to correct the misconceptions and to get the truth out there.
Yeah, he's got ego.
Their egos both are very, very big. And then, so he's like, you've heard the stories, now you want the truth of things, which is, obviously that's the basic premise of the books, is you got all these rumors about this crazy hero figure, and it's all about kind of telling the truth behind the legend. And then you get Chronicler saying, I thought you would be older. He says, I am, Kote said. And Chronicler looked puzzled, which obviously that's in relation to Kote spending time in the Fae. that he does not know how long he was in there. It could have been that he was in there for multiple years, but when he came out of the Fae, only a couple of days had passed. So it could be that he's much older than he looks because he's spent time in the Fae. It could be also that in the third book that he goes back into the Fae again and he spends a lot of time in there and ages many years, but the outside world doesn't age the same. Or it could be the reverse, that he goes in there and it feels like days, but the world moves by many years. And he comes out and people have been, he's been gone for many years, even though it's felt like days. So Fae's kind of weird like that, where time is not near the same as it is in his world.
It's interesting on the first read through. You don't know anything. He just says "I am," and you're like, he's gone through hell. We just heard that, so that's kind of how you read it. It's like, oh, so he's been through a lot. And I say that because it immediately moves on to something else. I think they immediately start talking about, oh, why are you here? And, Earl of Baden Bright and blah, 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 and like where he's going and blah, blah, blah. Like, so they just move on immediately. But yeah, in the first read through, you wouldn't know that.
I kind of took it more as like a smart ass comment. Like he's like, I thought you'd be older. And he's like, I am older. I'm a couple years older. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's the way I read it.
Yeah.
But like you said, first read through, you don't know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you obviously figure out it's literal. He's literally older than you'd guess.
Or it's sort of like when you see yourself in a photo or somebody sees himself in a photo, it's like, oh, so young here. It's like, that's every photo.
Yeah.
It's every single photo. Every one of
them. Then so you get Chronicler talking about as far as like how much time he would need to write the story, and he's, I'm willing to lose some sleep. I'll be off in the morning and out of your hair. And Kvothe's like, well, I wouldn't want to cost you any sleep. Kote said sarcastically, his eyes gone hard again. I can tell you the whole thing in one breath. He cleared his throat. I trooped, traveled, loved, lost, trusted, and was betrayed. Write that down and burn it for all the good it will do you.
So yeah, I like it. He kind of, in a much more delicate way, is like, yeah, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not doing that, bro.
Like,
so forget it.
It's like, oh, you want my story, and then you're going to fucking lay out the groundwork for how much time I have to tell it to you? So yeah, go kiss my ass. Here's my story.
It's a really cool back and forth, man, where they kind of do that, where he's like, well, we're getting a few things. One thing that I always like that he does in this, as well as he's done in so many other places, is we keep getting this clarity of how high Kvothe's standards are on like stories themselves and how music should be played, and it's, his upbringing feeds into that. But it's also things like this, like, nah, dude, I'm not going to tell my story unless I'm going to tell it right. I need time to prepare. I'm not just going to, the whole thing is like, I need exactly 3 days. I know exactly how much time I need. Like, it's great. And again, it just kind of builds him out with, we're constantly learning more, especially in these early chapters, early pages about Kvothe and everything that makes him up. And that's just a really, obviously, at least to me, a likable quality.
Yeah, the other important little nugget in there, I trooped, traveled, loved, lost, trusted, and was betrayed. Trusted and was betrayed is the huge nugget in there. Yeah. Who did he trust? Who betrayed him? Because obviously you got Sim and Will are people he trusts unequivocally. I don't think either of them would ever betray him. Maybe they could. Maybe something happens where they're threatened, where they don't have a fucking choice in the matter.
Yeah.
But I'd be surprised if they would be the ones to betray him. But it could be like someone like Braden, the guy that he plays tack with at Mayor Alvaron's place.
Yeah,
that could be someone.
That makes that actually makes a lot of sense. I like the idea. I don't like the idea he's betrayed at all. But Denna jumps out at me. But I don't know is it Baden? Or is it Braden? Whatever his name is.
Yeah.
We know what we're talking about. It's interesting because that guy he's a cool character. I like him. I like what him and Kvothe, what they have, sort of that, how they play that game together, and then they learn a lot from each other. But he's not they're not as familiar, right? He's always at arm's length to a degree, right? I don't know. It's hard to
Would it have been that big of a deal if he actually did betray him?
Well, that's what I mean. It would suck, but it would make a lot more sense. Will and Sim, I don't think the readers would like that. I personally wouldn't like that, and it also wouldn't. No. It doesn't fit into either. It wouldn't fit into their dynamic. Dinah would hurt the most, and that's kind of why it almost feels like that would make more sense than Will or Sim. It would either needs to
but
be
it
the
doesn't
most
feel like
extreme.
he has the thought. His dynamic with Dinah is so different that I don't think of her as someone that he trusts. That he trusts. He doesn't even understand her.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas with Threp or Will, Sim, Minette, Braden, these are all people, Tempe, I think of those type of people as people he trusts.
Well, it's because they actually depend on one another in situations. It doesn't seem like Dinah and Kvothe are there for one another, but they don't depend on one another. You know what I mean? It's...
Hey, what about Abinthy? That might make sense.
Yeah,
if Abinthy betrayed him and has got his family killed?
Could be.
Yeah, could be. I would be surprised if it went to something like that, but it could be. It could be Abinthy betrays him somehow. But yeah, I don't know. There's a number of different options, but there's not enough to really go on to really pin it down.
No, you're right though. I mean that's a huge nugget that's thrown in there though, where because we don't know. But that's something that is going to happen. Yeah, yes.
And then kind of the last thing, obviously, he convinces them that it's going to take 3 days, and Chronicler eventually agrees. And then you get at the end, one of my favorite parts, the man who called himself Kote looked up from behind his bottles, a full-lipped smile played on his mouth. The spark was kindling behind his eyes. He seemed taller. Yes, I suppose I am, Kvothe said, and his voice had iron in it. This right after Chronicler. It was Chronicler's serious expression returned. 3 days is quite unusual, but then again, some self-importance seemed to leak out of him. Then again, he made a gesture as if to show how useless words were. You are Kvothe, and that's when Kvothe's like, yes, I am. You get that fucking... even in this state where he's clearly felt like he's done some fucked up shit and he's not happy with himself. He's got an anguish feel to him when someone's like, yeah, dude, but you're Kvothe. And he's like, yeah, I am fucking Kvothe. I'm a bad motherfucker.
Yeah, his ego.
Still got that arrogant.
His ego brings him back to who he is, I think. When he says that iron in his voice makes you think, it goes along with all the other things, red hair and the, all the different things that go along with Kvothe being Kvothe just came out right there when he said, you know what? I am Kvothe. And it really showed in him, I thought.
Yeah. So I am a bad motherfucker, man.
I was going to mention, he mentions he could have, so when Chronicler's still thinking, oh, what am I thinking? I could just go and I'll go do the Earl and then I'll come back, and Kvothe's like, no, that ain't happening. And he's almost threatens him. What makes you think I'm going to let you leave? But he does say, Chronicler does say he could bring Scarpy back with him. So apparently Scarpy's where this Earl of Baden Bright is. But we still don't, I don't think it's still even mentioned where that is. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. So it's because it feels like Kvothe is kind of out there. He doesn't really know. Well, I mean, he's hiding, so yeah, he doesn't have connections to anybody, but
or allies.
And it's interesting that it felt like, oh, so there is there. Well, I don't know. It just felt like to me, it kind of jumped out at me. It's well, so now he has a bridge where he could get to Scarpy if he wanted to. Although, I mean, their relationship is just basically, as far as we know, it's just based on, the story he hears in Tarbean that wakes him up. Yeah.
I think it's clear he's got to meet him in the third book again, because when Chronicler mentions Scarpy is like, oh, Scarpy, he took you under his apprentice, did he? He took you under his wing, did he? He says something along those lines where it's heavily implied that he has now a personal relationship with Scarpy, that he knows him more than just that guy.
Yeah.
Like it's way too familiar. He's being way too familiar just looking at the time he meets him in Tarbean. Their interactions together are not enough for him to be that familiar with Scarpy, to like talk about him like he's a fucking friend or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
Definitely
seems like
seems
they're
that
going to
way.
meet again. It seems like they're going to meet again in the third book. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for me in chapter 6. I don't, if you guys got something, I think that's pretty much all I had to say on it.
Yeah.
That was all I had in chapter 6.
Yeah, I was just going to say that last part that you read from the end of the chapter, a spark was kindling behind his eyes. He seemed taller. That's one of the clearest indications we have thus far of the Kvothe dynamic there. And that peppers throughout.
So anytime he tries to tell his story, anytime he tries to tell his story, he starts talking about it, he snaps back.
Yeah, it's always, I was saying before, and I think the last episode, it's when he's active. It's when he's, so like, when he's telling his story, his mind's active. He's kind of reliving these things. So he gets that vibrancy back, but he also has that when like he's active, and when him and Bast are like doing things in the bar, when they had all those guests come into the bar, it was like, there's always that, I talked about it last episode, was that ebb and flow where as soon as everything gets quiet and he's left alone with himself, it's bad. It gets really bad and he sinks. But when there's things going on, there's things happening, then he's active. But I mean, he's put himself in the middle of nowhere. Like, so he's more often, he's got to be more often in this state of like just perpetual, depression and inactivity than anything else.
So maybe I can ask you, Dan, since you're, have a lot more experience in reads, when are the times that he does? I know right now, if I'm saying from right now, what I got, his ego has brought Kvothe out. Also, I feel like when he breaks the strawberry wine bottle, his anger brings it out. And then the previous time that they talked about that a couple chapters ago, when he's singing, it brings it out. Those three things. What else might bring it out, or what else should I be looking for that he starts becoming Kvothe, and what brings it out of him?
Yeah, it's a big mystery because it's a lot of different things. It seems like that it happens unconsciously.
Yeah, he can't do it by choice.
Out of the back of his mind. Yeah, like it
So
seems like even just when he once he realizes that he's being Kvothe, then it seems like he just disappears and just goes away. So it seems like maybe it's more like his sleeping mind still is there, but he can't access it. Similar to that when he called the name of the wind the first time, it's not like he had access to the name of the wind. It was just like a sudden emotion. So maybe there's things like that, sudden emotions, telling his story, things like that can bring it out of him. And that's also what makes me think that, that could be the role that Chronicler is there to do, to bring it out of him. Similar to Scarpy brought him back to being Kvothe when he was in Tarbean. He told him the stories, he said his name, and then Kvothe snapped to it. Maybe Chronicler's there to have Kvothe tell his story this time, and through telling his story, that's what ends up waking him up. But it's tough to say for sure. There's not enough information to do anything more than speculate.
Well, and it does kind of connect to Elodin, when he keeps saying, "I'm trying to teach you, I'm trying to show you," and then he starts to wake up to it when he's with Tempe and realizes, he does the spinning leaf in his mind, right? Where that seems to be what he's starting to realize is this is what Elodin was talking about this whole time. When you stop trying to grab my tits, that whole thing. I fucking love that.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, Tim, to your points that you were saying, his activity and when he's really doing something is when it happens. So like when he forgets himself,
Yeah, when he's not cognizant and he's not, because when the skin dancer comes in and he legit tries, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all, right? So it seems to be, and that's obviously a little bit different because when he's at the university, he's trying and it fucking works, man. His Alar's on point. He's out battling all these dudes. So it's not, there's that nuance though that of the sleeping mind, that what Elodin keeps trying to get him to wake up to, what he does start to access and get control of with the Adem. So he starts to get that, but that seems to be gone at this point. But it obviously what we're drawn at is it's still sort of, it's underlying for us to witness, but Kvothe seems to just not be tapped into it.
What's can you remind me of what you were just saying about spinning leaf in Elodin?
Well, when I was talking about Elodin, I was talking about the sleeping mind that he talks about and how he gets frustrated with Kvothe, where he's like, teach me. He's like, dude, I am teaching you. Stop trying to grab my tits. You remember that whole thing?
I remember that. Spinning leaf was
the spinning leaf is when he's in a demre, or however you say it, and it's like where he puts himself in the state of not thinking, trying to not think at all, and just immediate answers to their questions, right? The whole idea, and it's kind of, to me, I don't know about you, Dan, but it kind of resembles to a degree like Heart of Stone. But it's
a little bit, somewhat. Heart of Stone seems more, a little bit different. But what I kind of think of it is like when people tell you, like, if you're writing, just write, just stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Just the first words that pop out of your mouth, just fucking go with those. Like, so, like, stop thinking about what you're going to say and just say whatever fucking comes out. And that's kind of how I take Spinning Leaf, is just like, just stop thinking and just let it all flow.
Well, yeah.
Stream of consciousness.
That's a good way of saying it more directly. What I meant by like Heart of Stone, it's like he's putting himself into a conscious state, and it's a choice to not think and just let it go and just immediately.
Well, Heart of Stone's a little different though. Heart of Stone is more like cutting off your emotions.
But what I mean by saying that, is,
they're a little bit, they're very similar. They're cousins, but they're not. They're not quite the same.
Again,
what you're saying.
I don't mean exact. I just mean a conscious choice to put yourself in a position, in like a psychological state.
Yeah.
And
correct. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, and I even like the name for it, Spinning Leaf. It's it speaks to what I would picture, that it is. And we kind of talk about this with his music, man. When he's singing, when he's playing music, when he's not thinking, he's just being. I mean, it fucking wipes people out, man. And the same thing happens to him in Ademra. When he actually just accesses Spinning Leaf, people are impressed. Like, that's a great answer. Like, that's a really good answer. And he's coming out with these, and he thinks he's cheating. He's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just giving these answers off the top of my head. And they're like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. It's I like it. It's I've talked about this before. He's tapping into his chi, man.
Yeah, I'll throw in that it seems like he is fully tapped into his chi in the same way when he's in the Fae, right? This same kind of a wild, acting on your instincts alone and not really thinking about what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's actually in the Fae. It seems to also, because the way that life is there is so different. It seems to you seem to slide into it, even without trying. But yeah, I mean, and those are the times, and in Ademra and in the Fae, those are the times that he gets the most control of the Name of the Wind.
And he, in like when he becomes Kvothe in this chapter, in the Fae, or at least when he comes right out of the Fae, he's got a wild look about him, fiery eyes, taller, fiery red hair, all that stuff that we keep hearing about.
Yeah,
there's definitely a correlation.
He's got that control over the women. What was the word 50 Cent had for that? What was that? I can't think of it now.
I got the magic stick.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
I got the magic stick.
Is that really what you're looking for, Tim?
Well, not exactly, but the way the women in the bar, as soon as he gets there, they're like, you don't understand. This is whatever. He's embodying it, Again, it's the chi. It's all about the chi, man.
Mojo.
Yeah.
It's a vibe.
Yeah, it's
a vibe.
There you go.
All right, well, moving on to chapter 7 then, of beginnings and the names of things. In this chapter, Kvothe questions and quickly learns Chronicler's shorthand system. Kvothe begins telling his story, or rather, he debates himself on where to begin his story. And then he talks about his name and sort of a prologue to his story. So I liked Kvothe's confidence in this. It finally, his confidence is back in this, guys, in this chapter. What'd you think?
Yeah, it's one of the chapters where he's the most Kvothe of himself, like it compared, as far as like in the bar, he's the most himself that I can think of any of the other chapters where he's in the bar. He's the most himself, where like Chronicler goes through his spiel, like he's sitting there telling him how other people tell stories, and he's like, well, I got almost perfect memory, so people tell me the stories and then I remember it and then I just put it all in order. And he's like, an almost perfect memory is not good enough for me. And then Chronicler shows him his cipher, and Kvothe's able to understand his cipher, break it in like 15 minutes to the point where he can repeat it, repeat sentences, and say what he wants to say and write it down in that cipher without any mistake. And he picks that up in 15 minutes and just blows Chronicler's mind.
Yeah, you get the sense that Chronicler's astounded, especially because he asks about the language that Kvothe learned. Yeah, in 2 days.
It's really great. What I like so much about Kvothe in the chapter is that we get to see his intelligence. We get to see him, experience him break something down in an intelligent and ingenious way. So he's in action, rather than hearing about it, rather than stories telling us and showing us. This literally shows us in live time how he's able to figure something out. And you can tell he's kind of like enjoying it. It's like a little puzzle for him. It's so great, too, when he tests them and he like has them like write down all these words really quickly. He makes up a word, egolient, which I thought was great. And it's just, when afterwards Chronicler's like, kind of telling him and breaking it down, and Chronicler's like, wow, this might take a while. And he's like, he just keeps him going. And then boom, he figures it out. And he's like, what the fuck? He's kind of sitting there in awe.
Yeah.
Chronicler's
like,
possible?
Did you really learn Tema in a day?
Yeah.
And Kvothe's like, no, not a day. Of course, it took a day and a half. like so great. Like that's a perfect example of Kvothe, where it's like, this man, like, what are you, stupid? Day and a half.
What's also great about it, at the same time, he's still a human. He's still humble. Like he's like, the whole language. He's like, what? No, what? You can't learn a whole language in a day and a half. I don't think you ever can. Which is true. Like, I mean, unless you live in that culture, and even if you do, you still don't know the whole language.
Yeah, his genius is evident, but not to himself. He's almost like, he knows he's smart, but he's like, doesn't realize. Whereas Chronicler's sitting there astounded, like, as Kvothe's leading him through, trying to, okay, now show me the consonants. When he already got all the vowels and everything, now go on to the next thing. And he's leading him through. Chronicler's sitting there astounded, and Kvothe is just like absorbing the system, unaware of his own brilliance to some extent.
I love the idea.
Yeah, he knows he's brilliant, but it's commonplace to him.
Yeah, he just it's humble in the sense that it doesn't affect him. He has no hubris about it.
Well, yeah, and he's not doing it for show. That's the other thing. This is a practical application of he needs to know what this guy's capable of, and then he sees it. And I actually I enjoy the idea of how he has these symbols for the sounds, for the vowels and then consonants, and it's like you can write anything. He can, in theory, he can write a language that doesn't even exist, which is really cool to even imagine. So it's like that cipher in itself is quite ingenious, and obviously he's developed it. And even the way they set it up, where Chronicler has his paper and his inkwell, and it's like he's sitting ready. It's like he's like not a machine, but this is what he does for a living. This is his thing. So the whole scene, like, it plays out really cool like that. But yeah, it's a great way to show how Kvothe, again, in a really tangible way, is just very, very capable, very intelligent. He's not. It's just that's part of him. That's who he is.
So
Yeah, and it's not just like memory. Like he's able to figure things out.
Yeah.
It really demonstrates that it's not just like he has to be told. Like he sees it and he just figures out like, oh, okay, so these are the vowels, these are the consonants, like da da da. Okay, yeah, no, I got it. He just figures it out largely on his own without having to be told very much.
So just a quick aside here, guys. Have you ever looked into old shorthand systems that people used? I found I didn't know anything about it. I mean, you hear of stenograph, what people use in the court. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. But I found an old like from the early 1900s, an old handbook of shorthand. Again, this is just an aside. You guys look into it. It's very similar to what they're talking about here, where each different sound is just like a small, circle or different thing. So it's real easy to write things really fast. I mean, obviously that's what it's about, but look into it. It's an interesting old world. It's not something that people use anymore because we don't even hardly write anymore with typewriters.
I will never look into it. I will never look into it. It seems like a complete waste of my time.
Well, it is a foregone, foregone thing. So, by all means, Dan, forget about it.
I got voice to text, man. We've flown past that technology.
And did you hear me almost say we have typewriters now? I almost said that. Typewriters.
Yeah, typewriters. Yeah, yeah. We're all the way in the age of typewriters.
We have word processors now, guys. We don't need them.
Word processor.
And then, like the next part is him moving into his story, and this is one of the things I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit here. He goes, before we begin, you must remember that I am of the adhere. We were telling stories before Kalaptena burned, before there were books to write in, before there was music to play. When the first fire kindled, we were there spinning stories in the circle of its flickering light. So one thing I haven't talked to you guys about yet is when Scarpy tells his story, and he tells, the story of the Creation War the first time, and then the second time around he gets to the aftermath of the Creation War, and he tells about Celatos talking to Aleph, and there's, Telu and a bunch of other people that are around there, and they describe this group of people, they describe them as the Ruach. And these Ruach are, obviously very, very powerful namers in this world. These are extremely powerful people in this world. And this is kind of 5,000 years ago, and so this group was called the Ruach. When he's telling this story, Aleph goes to Celatos and he makes him an offer to join him and become an angel, but Celatos turns it down because he wants to go after the Chandrian. He wants revenge. And so he turns down his offer to become an angel because Aleph's deal was you won't be able to go seeking revenge. You'll have to just kind of seek out things as they happen and be more of a justice figure from here on out, not being able to go correct past deeds or prevent future deeds. So Celatos turns him down, and this is where the Amyr is created. Celatos creates the Amyr. But there was also a third group of the Ruach that did not join Aleph and become angels, and also did not join Celatos to become the Amyr. These guys didn't want any part of any of that nonsense, and they went their own route. So the reason I bring that up is when they're talking about the adhere, they were there when the first fire kindled. They were there before there were books to write and before music was to play. I think that the Adhimaru span out of members of the Ruach that did not join Aleph or Celatos, that they went out into the world, became nomads after everything was destroyed, and just kind of went their own route, and they ended up living this nomadic life, and through the years ended up becoming storytellers, and then through storytellers, and they eventually became people that became actors, and they became a traveling troupe through the years. But I think it spawned from a group of them came out and became a nomadic tribe that eventually spanned into these amazing troopers, these amazing performers. And I think the reason that they might be so above and beyond better than all the other troops in the world is because their lineage traces back to some of the most extremely powerful people in the world.
So, Dan, can I just kind of reel you back a little bit? At the beginning of this chapter, Kvothe he starts telling his story, names Aleph as God, right? Aleph is God?
That's after. That's later on in the chapter.
Real quick, I wanted to,
but at the beginning of his story.
Well, I wanted to mention, so with what Dan's saying, the nomads that come from the Ruach, I could see also along with the Ru could possibly be Tinkers, because we were saying they go way back. They're also nomadic, and they also seem to be in stories that go way, way back. And then also in terms of the nomadic, also aren't the I always draw a blank. The Adem. Yeah. So they're nomadic as well. Although, I always feel like there's this. When it comes to the other parts of the world, it almost feels like they may have a different history, but there's a similarity between those three groups. You know.
Yes.
They're all all those guys. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get clarity. They're all Ruach. In those stories and everything from the beginning, those people are all Ruach, and then you have Aleph and the two separate groups, but they're all Ruach.
I'm saying they're all there. You have a group that is this was 5,000 years ago. This is from the stories that Scarpy was telling. Like, at least the powerful people in this world were described as Ruach. So this would be people like Celatos, Aleph, Telu, Lyra, Lanre. These would be type of people that were described as Ruach. And after Lanre betrayed them and the Chandrian was created and they sacked cities, Aleph tried to get people to join him to become angels. Celatos turned him down, created the Amyr, and then there was another group of the Ruach that went their own way. So what I'm saying is that some of those Ruach that did not join the angels or the Amyr, I think some of them became nomadic people that founded the Adhimaru. And then, like Tim said, some of them I do think also founded the Adem. Because you have, like with the Adem, when Sheehan or Shayan, whatever her name is, the leader of the Adem, the leader of the group of Adem that Kvothe meets, she talks about like the guys that have the two that created the 99 stories, and I can't remember what their names were, but it's unimportant. But anyways, they were. She describes them as all the cities of the world were destroyed, and they were wandering the world as nomadic figures looking for a home, and it took many years before they settled in at the place where Kvothe finds them. It took them a long time, but when they describe it like as all the cities were destroyed and all that kind of stuff, that's very similar to the Creation War. So it dates the Adem very far back. Plus, their swords are thousands of years old. They can't break. They don't rust. They're not normal swords. There's something magical about them, and the lineage of those swords traces so far back that it makes me think that they are also possibly people that spawn from the Ruach that did not join Aleph or Celatos. And then the Tinkers, they also date extremely far back, so they could have been, but I also think that the Tinkers probably are probably Fae creatures as well. So I think maybe some of the Ruach also went to the Fae, and the Tinkers spawned from them. So yeah, I think there's these groups in this world that spawn very far back. They have lineages to extremely powerful people, and they went in different routes, but I think it lends credence to why Kvothe is so powerful, is that it's not just, he's the chosen one. It's that he is a descendant of people that were the most powerful people in the world 5,000 years ago.
Could you maybe hash that story out of the two that came up with the 99 stories that from what, if I'm understanding you correctly, may have become the Ru, the Edema Ru? No, I don't remember that story.
He's talking about the Adem.
Right, the Adem telling the story, but the two... Well,
yeah, the 99 stories was... Yeah, like, just real quickly, it's not central, but to the point, but there was basically, like, when they were... Before they developed the Katan and they were fighting with swords, they were fighting with arrows, and one of them was really good with arrows, and he trained another person. They ended up disputing each other, and they had a fight, and so they challenged each other to the death. And one of them shot the mentor at that time. He like shot his arrow, and it went straight through the girl's chest, and then she just lit a string, basically like a thread of a shirt, and she just let that thread go, and that thread like drifted in the wind and hit his heart. And then while she was like laying in bed, and this guy's so full of remorse, she told him the 99 stories, which the 99 stories were the beginning of the Lethani, of their moral code, basically. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Okay, that doesn't have anything to do...
It doesn't have anything to do with this, but it's a dope-ass story. It's a cool story.
Yeah, and well, obviously, when we come upon it, we'll dig into it a little more. But yeah,
what I like about so much how Kvothe says this, I'm a Ru, we go all the way back, we have all this history. He basically says that to say, I'm going to tell my story the way it's going to be told. I understand your reputation, your abilities. Don't fuck with my story. And that's kind of what he's saying here. Yeah. It's like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to tell stories. It's in my blood. So I'm going to tell you the way it needs to be written. Do your cipher shit, but don't fuck with my story. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Like he's putting it out there. Like, this is, again, one of the ways, if we're going to do this, this is the way it's going to be done.
And it's similar because you got like Chronicler's the storyteller of the world, the guy that goes and collects stories, and like this is what he does for a living. So it'd kind of be like Patrick Rothfuss comes over and you're like, all right, let me tell you a fucking story. Now don't fucking change it. Don't fucking put your own fucking spin on it. Don't fuck my shit up. I got some really dope shit, and don't fuck it up for me. Here's how it goes.
I can see that going. I say. I can see that going exactly the way you said it, Dan, if you ever told Rothfuss your story.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, and I would not want him to mess it up. I would lay it down. We get that thing out so quick too. Be so much quicker.
What's funny about it too is he says all that, and then he can't figure out how to start the story. Because like, all right, so we start here. Yeah. We start here. Well, I guess I should start here.
He was being clever, I think, when he was doing that, though, because it wasn't like he was really waffling. Because then he goes into in the beginning, as far as I know, the world was spun out of the nameless void by Aleph, who gave everything a name, or depending on the version of the tale, found the names of all things already possessed. I think he was just kind of. It shows his great storytelling ability. He's being clever. He's being cute with it, but it's an interesting way to open it up.
That line you just mentioned was what I was hinting at earlier, that he's starting to tell us the importance of names. And I like how he did it here, where it's Aleph gave everything a name, or, depending on the version of the tale, found the names all things possessed, which is what Elodin is talking about, which is what everyone used to do at the university, it was all about naming. It was all about knowing the names of things, which is sort of gone by the wayside because now they do more, I guess you would say they're easier in a way, which is like the sigildry and, the sympathy and the stuff they do. They focus on now not naming, when it used to be the focus was naming, where people were more powerful because of that. But I love that, man. I love that Rothfuss chose that because he chose to write a book where magic lives in the world. And how does it live in the world? You know the names of things. You know the names of things, and you can control them. It's great, man. It's great. And then the way that he's kind of, again, leading us into understanding it, it's subtle, and he's pulling us in this direction.
Yeah, and we get kind of the three pivotal beginnings to his story when he says there's basically, he had his three ways he could start the story. One is his meeting at the Elolian when he sings the lay of Sir Travian Trailiard, Sir Savian Trailiard. He sings that with Denna, so he thinks of that as one of the starting points to his story. He thinks of is going to the university to learn magic and all that kind of stuff is one of the pivotal parts to his story. And then he settles on, no, the story's really about the Chandrian. But I expect the true beginning lies in what led me to the university. Unexpected fires at twilight, a man with eyes like ice at the bottom of a well, the smell of blood and burning hair, the Chandrian. He nodded to himself. Yes, I suppose that is where it all began. This is in many ways a story about the Chandrian.
What's he talking about? A man with eyes like ice at the bottom of a well, Dan?
Cinder.
Why is he at the bottom of a well?
His eyes.
No. Like a man with eyes like ice at the bottom of a well. Like ice, like cinders.
Glare. I get it now.
His sign is ice, and then like a bottom of a well is dark, and Cinder has dark eyes with no iris. So between the ice and the darkness, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, like it. I don't know, like a deep black. If it's got that little glint. Like ice at the bottom of a well would have a little. Yeah. I get it now.
I mean, it's an extreme way of saying it. Obviously,
it's
very dramatic.
Like, what do you mean? Yeah, a man with eyes like glass or like ice, who's at the bottom of the well. I was like, wait a minute, that didn't make sense. Thought I was missing something there.
He's talking about Cinder there, which obviously is Cinder's pivotal, and he, as far as anybody. I think if he could kill anybody of the Chandrian, if he just had his druthers, it would be Cinder would be the man he would fucking get revenge on.
Well, it's really interesting too to think about this as a reread. He's accomplishing what he wished he could find all these years. Is a story about the Chandrian. He can't find it. Now there's going to be one. At least his experience, and he's got an experience more intimate than most, than most of the world, obviously.
Yeah, he's going to lay out their names, their signs, everything. He's going to lay out the case for who the Chandrian are, and I would assume that we're going to learn, why they do what they do and that kind of stuff as well.
Could be a problem. Could cause some problems for himself.
Speaking of that, and not to call Rothfuss out,
he's kicking up dust.
But as he's when he gets into the story and starts talking about the Adim, and begins to tell their names, and Bast starts freaking out about it. So why wouldn't Bast freak out about him even telling the story of his parents getting killed?
Because just it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as just telling stories. That's why, is because there's more to it.
Because he says the names, right?
Their actual names, yeah. It's not as simple as just telling stories about them or things like that. Otherwise, those kids are out there singing, what's they're playing, Chandrian. Like, it's not as simple as just telling telling stories. It's something deeper.
Right, but Kvothe is telling a way deeper story. So anyway, it's because of the names.
Yeah.
It seems
it's more.
and it seems like the names are beacons, or they act as a beacon, but it's the real names too. Because again, the most power is in the true names. We haven't been told the true names. Now they're hinted at a bit. The Demra called the Chandrian something else, but we don't know if that's the true name or not. But yeah, they seem to act as a beacon, which is what you're talking about with Bast. Why wouldn't he get pissed? About him talking about that story, but yeah, it seems it's not enough because all right, so Kvothe's parents, when they're singing songs, they're singing their true names, right?
Well, I don't know that we know.
More than likely, yeah. More than likely, we don't know for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what's
you would assume. Yeah, you would assume. And then after that, though, you get into Kvothe starts to tell his story, and he's like, "My name is Kvothe, pronounced nearly the same as Koth. Names are important as they tell you a great deal about a person. I've had more names than anyone has a right to." And he says, "The Adim called me Madra, which, depending on how it's spoken, can mean the flame, the thunder, or the broken tree." So he goes into the flame, which he says, "The flame is obvious. If you've ever seen me, I have red hair, bright. If I had been born a couple 100 years ago, I would probably have been burned as a demon." Which is one of the nice tidbits about this world, is that they treat gingers appropriately. It seems like that good, honest tradition has died out because it happened a couple 100 years ago. But it was a healthy tradition that I appreciate about this world, and it's a little disappointing it still doesn't continue. But it's at least nice that the tradition existed at one time.
Right at your family, Tim. He's going right in at your family.
And then he says, "I keep it yeah. I keep it short, but it's unruly. When left to its own devices, it sticks up and makes me look as if I've been set afire." And then he goes into the thunder I attribute to a strong baritone and a great deal of stage training at an early age. I've never thought of the broken tree as very significant, although in retrospect, I suppose it could be considered at least partially prophetic. That I'm curious about because they talk about prophetic, and there's only a few trees that are mentioned of significance. You have the Kothe's tree. You have the tree that the Adim use when you're going to test to join the group, with the following leaves that are like basically almost like razor blades. And then there's the tree that he strikes down with lightning.
That's the one that came to my mind.
Yeah. The only thing about fighting, that...
I'm sorry, when he's fighting Cinder, right?
Well, it's like that battalion with Cinder at the head of it, yeah.
Cinder, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Correct, yeah. Yeah, you find out late after the fact that it was Cinder. The Kote is the one that tells him it was Cinder. But yeah, that bandit group that he calls lightning down on that tree doesn't necessarily like call lightning down, but he, he shoots a arrow at it and basically uses it like a lightning rod that pulls the lightning to the tree.
Awesome.
But the one thing that makes me think that it might not be that is that the Adim are the one that call him broken tree, and he says it was prophetic, and he meets the Adim after that. So when they're talking about it being prophetic, it makes me think that this is something that happens after he meets the Adim. But it could be that, they're saying that his name is Madra. It's always been Madra. Even before he met the Adim, it was Madra. So that's what makes it prophetic, is that it was Madra, broken tree from the beginning. So it could be that, but also it could be that it's something else, like he goes and meets the Kote again and destroys his tree, or yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think something like that could be it too.
Well, maybe something to do with the Adim's tree that they have to do the test under.
Well, if that's the case, then he does something to either that tree or the one with the Kote in it. That's what it tells me. He
You would think,
He does something.
yeah, it's one of those two. It would make more sense if it's like, because I don't even see any reason he would break the Adim's tree, but like it would make sense that if he broke the Kothe's tree.
It's interesting. Rothfuss clearly has a thing for trees and wood. When he fights the Dracus, he ends up in that that tree lights up on fire, which is an awesome image. That whole scene is freaking great. But then also like the Roa, right? Like he's got a thing for it, which I mean it's good because I mean they're the oldest thing on Earth, damn near, right? And they last much longer than most living things. So I don't know. I like it.
Most?
Yeah.
What lasts longer than a tree?
I don't know. Water. I don't know.
No, living things. Oh, you're like Bruce Lee. You
water,
think
everything's alive.
You think water's alive? Oh yeah, you're right. He does have a thing for wood. Old Patty boy.
Yeah.
Trees.
Yeah.
A lot of trees.
And
a lot of
comes up. It comes up a lot. But I don't know what it would be. But I think there's something. It's either the tree he broke with the lightning, or it's something to do with. My guess would be the Kothe's tree. That could be something like that.
I had a question about when he talks about his names further, and he goes further into his names and says how Ben called him Amyr, a Felurian called him Dulator, which I don't remember her calling him that. At least we didn't read that. Not as far as I remember. Shadakar, Lightfinger, and Six String. So most of those I get. Shadakar, that I don't remember reading about anywhere.
Well, the first one, my first mentor called me Adhere. Adhere means seer, for one. So like you had the three groups at the university when you're working your way up to become an arcanist. Adhere was the first step. That's seer. Relar means speaker. Alpha, we don't know what alpha means yet. We'll find out alpha in the third book. My guess would be shaper or namer, but we don't know what it means. But Adhere means seer. And then my first lover called me Dulator, which obviously that would be Felurian. We never hear Felurian describe him as Dulator. But this is one of those moments where it was like, he's not giving you everything that happens in the story, like obviously, otherwise these dudes got to take a major piss by now because it's been years because they're not going to the bathroom at all at any point in the story. So clearly, he's not covering
they're
everything.
Not flossing.
So.
They're not brushing their teeth.
No. It's terrible dental hygiene.
Bad hygiene.
I've never even heard Kvothe, all his money troubles and how much he focuses on the stuff he buys. Not heard him buy toilet paper once. So he's definitely fucking rubbing his shit raw with something. Doesn't sound pleasant. But
bidets.
Maybe that's how he got the name Shady
Yeah.
Car. Like when I saw Shady Car, you know what I thought of? I thought of Shit Dynasty.
Shady Nasty.
That is what came to mind.
That's Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference.
Well, one of them we know. Six String is obviously from playing the lute with six strings. Lightfinger, I don't know.
I figured it could be the same. It could be
Shadakar.
Lightfinger could be from playing the lute. It could also be strike lightning with his hand, because he's earned a reputation of being able to do that in multiple occasions. It could be a connection of the two, So those I could easily
I don't know.
Easily accepted. It was just Shadakar. I'm like, did I miss something? That's why it jumped out at me.
The only thing that it even my mind even goes to at all is maybe it has something to do with the shade that he gets from Felurian. But outside of that, I don't have a guess. And I don't know Shadakar. why it would have anything to do with the shade. But I assume those are two things we're going to find out in the next book, because I don't have a good guess. But then you get Koth the Bloodless, which we know is from the whippings and possibly the fact that he's a Demaru, which is no noble bloodline, basically low birth. Kvothe the Arcane, because of his extreme powers as an arcanist at the university. The fact that he's able to just fuck everybody up with his sympathy, and he can defeat two people at the same time with ease and all that kind of shit. That's kind of how he's built his name up as Kvothe the Arcane. And then the big one, Kvothe Kingkiller. So he's known as Kingkiller at this point. So he's killed a king in the third book. In the story that we're going to get in the third book, he will kill a king.
I was going to say, the most important thing is I have earned those names, bought and paid for them. Yeah, so that's where it's like, oh, okay, so this is what goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like the guesses would be is you'd have King Roderick, obviously he's the king now. Mayor Alvaron's pretty close to being king, so it could be something where he becomes a king, or Ambrose through the story, his family is moving up the ranks, and so they're getting closer and closer to being next in line to being king. So could be, or Vichette's Poet King.
Oh yeah,
could be that one. Those are the only
I'm
options.
Sorry.
Ambrose and his dad, the mayor, Roderick, and the Poet
Vichette
King.
trains him. Vichette trains him in Endemra, and she worked for the Poet King before she trained Kvothe. That was
now,
her. He worked for him. I don't know. He like.
Yeah, you remember who Vichette is?
Yes.
Fitz?
Yeah, the old lady,
yeah,
right?
So yeah, no, not the old lady. She was the one that was training Kvothe and teaching him how to fight with the sword, and teaching him how, kept fucking beating his ass, constantly and shit, and slept with him. Sleeping with him for a while.
Apparently.
Yeah. And then, it's like brushing teeth, man. But the Vichette mentioned that when she was kind of a mercenary out in the world, she worked with a guy she called her Poet King. So it could be that guy. We don't know anything about him more than that, but it could be her Poet King. That's one of the options.
So I kind of want to shake it down a little bit. The mayor I thought I remember the mayor being just like one or two ticks away, whereas Kvothe's enemy at the university is like 13 or 12.
Well, with the mayor, isn't also his bloodline was like the king of Vent. His bloodline was like the most powerful, right?
Yeah, I think he was a king at one time. Yeah. So it could. I don't think it is the mayor, and I'm not going to go into it now because there will be a chapter where I think gives a very big clue on the mayor, and I'll wait until we come upon it. But I don't think it was the mayor. But as far as the other people, I could definitely see Roderick. I could see a way where Ambrose's family works their way up into being king, and he kills Ambrose's dad, or Ambrose's dad dies and Ambrose takes over and is king, and then he kills Ambrose. Or I could see it as being the Poet King. Maybe we are introduced to him in the third book and that's who it is. But I think those are the most likely choices.
Yeah, most importantly though, it's he earned it. Like you said, Tim, he earned it. We know that for sure, not just because the name of the series is King Killer, and the name of the podcast. He earned the title.
He's also got to do Patty's got to do a lot of work in book 3 to build to this king being in position and us actually giving a shit about him, because so far the ones that are mentioned, there's not a lot. I mean, other than Alvaron, we know a lot about him. He does a tremendous job of showing that noble blood that living your entire life as a noble that everybody, everyone around you a freaking lick spittle, like you kind of get that impression from Alvaron. I mean, other than that, the nobility is, well, like Dan's mentioned, we've heard these other names like King Roderick, the Poet King. We don't know anything about. We know a little bit about Poet King only from the Shet speaking of him. And it's really just a representation of the rest of the world and how most of the rest of the world acts and how the Ademra don't act that way and how different they are culturally. So all I'm getting at is Patty's got to do a lot of work to lay the groundwork for us to really be emotionally involved in who this king is. And I guess the event in itself will be a big enough deal, but I don't know.
But there's
when we eventually get into the second book, I have a theory on who the king is, who he kills, why he kills him, and all that kind of stuff. I will dive into it very, very deeply, but it'll be something once we get to the second book, and there's more information that we need. We're not there yet. I'm not going to go through every single one of my theories, on every single episode. So I'm going to wait and save some of them for when the chapters come up that make it relevant to talk about it. But I do have a theory on who the king is.
So,
and, we'll eventually get
seems
there.
Pretty selfish.
I think it's very
seems
strong.
Pretty selfish.
Yeah.
But, whatever.
No, let me ask you real quick, Dan. So there is, in your opinion, enough information to declare a clear frontrunner for the king?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting.
Obviously not so far,
No.
but at some point, yes, yeah. And I won't wait until we get every single clue, but I'll at least wait until we get to the first clue,
and
before I go and spell out my theories.
It's really not surprising that may be the case because as an early reader or one-time reader and just going through it the second time, there's so much that I'm learning already just from talking to you guys and you guys showing me. It doesn't surprise me one bit that there's all these little hints that are dropped that would someone who's read it a lot would be able to pick up on and really know where Rothfuss is going with this.
Yeah, and just so people don't feel like we're gonna be fucking just teasing theories, like the next episode we get into, I know for sure we're going to get into deeply on some of the biggest theories in the book and some of the biggest overall arching themes of the book, and I'm definitely going to bring up some shit that is very subtle, very easy to miss, and I'll dive in deep to that onto that. So We'll constantly talk about theories and go into deeply into them, but I will hold some of them back until we get to a chapter where we run across the clue, and then I will bring up the clue and then kind of fill it out and show you where all the other clues are in the book as well, and just kind of put them all together. But yeah, I think I have a good guess. I don't know for sure, but I think I have a good guess, and we'll get to it.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And then I have stolen princesses back from sleeping barrow kings. Another one. I think I have a very good guess on that. We will come to that later on in the first book. But I think I have a very, very good guess on who the stolen princess is and what the sleeping barrow kings is referencing.
What's a barrow king? What's a barrow?
I'm not sure, like a hill or something. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to.
I believe.
I'd have to look it up.
I think it is a hill, or maybe it's just a guy.
But yeah, that's what I
maybe
picture.
It's just a guy that owns a lot of wheelbarrows.
That's the only time I've ever heard the word barrow.
Yeah. It's a wheelbarrow without wheels. It's a barrow. But,
okay. Or maybe
and then you got
so maybe this guy just puts one of those things on his back and he's a king.
Yeah. No, it's a thing. It's a thing you put trash in when you're not going to move it anywhere. You just want to keep the trash in a thing.
Yeah. He's just dragging it on the ground. Got all his treasures.
It's called a crate.
Huh?
It's called a crate.
He's like the bums with the grocery carts.
So this guy owns a junkyard, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
And apparently he has a princess. And Kvothe, he likes those shoeless white trash girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm just let me.
It's got a type.
I want you guys
got
to
a type for sure.
I want to just hash this out fully. So this guy has a junkyard where he has a lot of broken wheelbarrows with no wheels, and he's
just barrels,
and he has kidnapped a princess and is hiding her in one of the shacks on the junkyard. Is that right?
Isn't this?
Yeah, Tammy Lynn. He is Tammy Lynn, the princess.
Isn't this the premise of Mario Brothers?
Yeah.
You know what? Koopa, he's got a barrow on his back, a big spiky barrow.
Koopa is so we've cracked it, Rothfuss. We know what you're doing, dude. It's just Mario Brothers.
It's Mario Brothers.
That's all it is.
You just ripped off Mario Brothers.
Well, I'm glad we hashed that out.
Mario Brothers into the middle of the stories. He's gonna be jumping on mushrooms and shit.
So is Will Luigi? Like who's?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then we get some things we definitely know. I burned down the town of Tarbean, which is obviously when he fought the Dracus, and then I've spent the night with Felurian and left both my sanity and my life. I was expelled from the university at a younger age than most are allowed in. That's more than likely is referencing when he called the name of the wind against Ambrose, and then he was called up on the horns, and they expelled him, but then they suspended the sentence and ended up, whipping him 6 times.
Oh, did they expel him?
They promoted him to Relar as well. Yeah, they expelled him, and then he was like, his heart dropped, and then the next, I think it might even go to the next chapter, and then it was like, does anybody call to suspend the sentence? And they all raised their hand.
That's an intense back and forth, man.
Yeah. So they make it sound like they're kicking him out, but then pull it back right after that and say, they're suspending the sentence, but they don't suspend the whippings. They still whip the shit.
It's pretty great, dude, because you really enjoy him getting to the university. And I remember just really being anxious and excited about his experiences there and what it's going to be like. And then when he keeps teasing that he's going to take it away, you know what I mean? It really bothered me when I'm reading that, where it's like, nah, come on, man. Like, so yeah.
Well, and the whole thing was he wanted to get there so that he could read 1,000 books, and immediately he's not allowed to go into the library.
Yeah. So yeah, seeing him get expelled, and that would have been rough if he didn't. They didn't suspend the sentence. And then we get, I tread paths by moonlight that others fear to speak of during day. I have talked to gods, loved women, and written songs that make the minstrels weep. You may have heard of me, which I fucking love that last line.
I love that confidence.
May have heard of me, like that fucking arrogance, that fucking just that swagger. I like it. It's one of my favorite parts of Kvothe is when he's got that fucking swagger and he's like, yeah. I am a badass.
What a great chapter to introduce you to the true hero we've been reading about this whole time. I mean, this whole time, but these first chapters, finally we're really reading from his point of view who he really is.
Yeah, and you get little hints of all the stories you're going to read about. Like, some of them we know, and then others, like I said, I have guesses on, and others I don't know at all. Like, so it gives you a little taste of what's to come.
Boy, I'll tell you, this chapter really was one of those that I read through and am just like, man, there's so much here that I just have no idea what he's talking about. It's another one of those, Tim, where it's like he's feeding you, he's throwing out these little bits and baits, and you want to get it, but you're not there yet. You have to keep reading.
Well, and a lot of it's so important, too. Like, I've spent the night with Felurian and left with both my sanity and my life. I mean, to say that he left with his sanity and his life, apparently people don't do that. Apparently they get trapped.
Yeah.
And they either lose their mind or they're never coming back. Yet he did. He's exceptional, clearly. Magic stick.
Which we know, we know that's actually the case. When he meets Felurian, we see why men lose their mind. Like, we see him almost break. So, yeah, we see it's not just a saying. It's not being a braggart. Like, it was extremely difficult, and it took a ton of power.
Yeah,
to be able to resist
it's
her.
really interesting too, because in so much of what we read, he lacks a certain amount of self-control. But with her, man, he kind of doesn't miss a beat. He's constantly being pulled, but then he checks himself in ways that he just doesn't. But I guess he knows. He knows he has to be on his shit, because if not, he could die. He could lose it all.
Yeah, in the beginning, like, his part of his mind snapped and went insane, and he cordoned that. He used, his alar, which we'll get to. He used his alar to cordon that part of his mind off and just let it go, fucking go crazy, writing a song and fucking being madly in love with her. And he just left that part of his mind that was breaking, that was making him go insane. He broke that apart and put it in a corner.
It also
put baby in a corner.
It did also.
It
did also. I was just gonna say, it did also occur. Him spending time with Felurian occurred at a really opportune time for him, because he had just accomplished so much. He'd just gotten to a new level of experience and capability that he would have never thought possible prior. And which is a big part of the reason why he's like, "Fuck it, let's do this." Like, he just goes. Even when I remember even like reading it, I'm just like, wait, for real? Like, he just says screw it and goes. It's pretty great.
Yeah, and the way that as we talked about, the way that he gets one over on her, so to speak, speaks to his cunning. He's very clever, that Kvothe. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hadn't. Like, this is the first time I'm picking that up.
Now that you mention it,
extremely insightful.
You might want to read through it again, Dan. There's a lot of instances where he's cunning.
I missed any sign of wit or cunning out of him.
Yeah, it's
very subtle, very subtle. But yeah, I think that's pretty much that chapter for me.
Yep.
I only had one other thing. And it may have even been in the previous chapter, but it seemed like Chronicler came down the stairs and he noticed the sword folly and noticed that the light hit it differently. Is that this chapter or the previous?
Would have had to been the previous, chapter 6, beginning of chapter 6.
I didn't know if there was any other insight you might be able to give to that, Dan.
Nothing that I can think of other than, we talked about that the sword more than likely came from someone powerful.
Yeah.
But not just off of that, I don't pick anything up.
All right, then chapter 8 is called Thieves, Heretics, and Whores. In this chapter we learn that Kvothe was part of a traveling troupe called the Adhere, and that Kvothe's dad is the leader of his personal troupe. And they're confronted by the mayor of a small town, where we find out that troop is actually pretty prestigious. Kvothe sees Abinthy for the first time, getting harassed by the mayor and a constable. Abinthy calls the name of the wind when they're getting ready to break his arm, I think. And anyway, he scares him off, and then Kvothe goes and talks to him, and Abinthy ends up going along with the troop on their journey.
Yeah, and when you're getting introduced to the Rue, you get the sense of why Kvothe is so multi-talented. Is he's had an upbringing surrounded by a diverse group of very talented people, and then he's also got people that join up with the troop to just travel on the road safely. So he's running into a diverse range of people that most kids would not be accustomed to. So when you combine that with his just natural intelligence and his talents and his abilities, that was like the prototype for perfect environment for a kid like that to grow up in.
Would be a pretty fun upbringing too. I think he calls it like a an everyday fare, which, made me think of like, festivals, modern day festivals, which is basically what it is, where if you're a kid and you just got to go to festivals every day and travel the countryside, to be a great childhood.
Yeah, it's like growing up in a big circus.
Well, and it's also, I mean, like just the intrigue of so many different varieties of different types of people. People with different backgrounds. I remember him mentioning something about spending time with particular women and not really understanding exactly why he likes spending time with them. Like little things like that, where it's like, you're getting pictures of like, how that would be for a kid, being able to spend time with all these different types of people. But then also, I think the most important thing that I always feel like is layered in here is the affection with his parents, how he has an affection and respect towards them, which is obviously quite important in terms of understanding who he is. If the first time he mentions his parents, if that wasn't there, that would tell you a lot about him and who he is. But yeah, he's got a lot of affection and respect for them. And it sounds like he had a great childhood. It was a lot of fun. He learned a lot. Yeah, that shaped him who he was.
Yeah, and you get you start getting your first sense that the Rue, they're super talented. Like they're not just some amateur hour troupe going around, dancing in the street for coins. They're extremely talented. Yet the perception of the Rue is that they are scumbag thieves and rapists and bums and drunkards, and they just have this terrible reputation, which flies in the face of everything that we see about them. They're the disconnect between who they actually are and how talented they are versus how everybody sees them is it's just a massive disconnect.
It's really interesting for the main character to be in that position and it's great too, because he's never throughout the entire 2 books, he's always saying, in all these different situations, you always say, I'm Rue to my bones because I'm Adima Rue. And then it's kind of his way that he's able to accomplish whatever situation he's in in many ways. That kind of it comes up a lot, where he always comes back to that, and it seems to be his anchor of his his confidence is in his own ability to own the situation. And so he's not at all obviously embarrassed by it or anything like that, but at the same time he's aware of what the reputation is like, and we are. So it's a super interesting dichotomy there of they should be very much respected, but instead it's the opposite.
He gets angry with the fact that they're disrespected. He doesn't just like, that's the way it is. People don't like us. He's like, no, fuck that dude. Well, he's a fucking idiot. Like who the fuck is this guy to look down his nose at us? This guy probably can't even fucking read. I mean, he's like got he's got that fire in his belly. He's not one to just take an insult and just eat it and bow and scrape in front of these people. He knows he's better than them, and he's not he doesn't want to play that game where he's got to pretend that their opinions matter.
Yeah, and speaking of that scenario, I like the way that Arladin holds himself at this point when the mayor's, like he's been through it 100 times as a guest, but still he teaches Kvothe, this, at least the guy's honest, like most people think it and don't say it, he just kind of got a stoic way about him, just kind of above everything and the wise one in the situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, he even goes as far as telling Kvothe, just pity him, my boy. Tomorrow we'll be on our way, but he'll have to keep his own disagreeable company until the day he dies. And then Kvothe shoots right back. He's an ignorant blatherskate. I mean, so like, yeah, he doesn't soften. It doesn't soften Kvothe's disdain for the guy, which is it's good to read. But yeah, it's clearly Arladin. He's traveled. He's experienced with these guys, and he knows. be diplomatic in the situation. But he's a great actor too. We know that already, but there's something Kvothe says about when the guy realizes who they are and realizes, oh shit, I should give them the hall, to perform. And he's just like, no, I don't want to, Arladin's like, I don't want to put you out. But the way he says it, the way Kvothe explains it, he's showing like, go fuck yourself. But at the same time, he's playing it up. And that seems to be communicated to everyone that's in that group there, which is, again, you put up that diplomatic front, but at the same time, he's putting the guy in his place. Yeah, it's kind of like political, I guess, to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, he shows him little teeth. I mean, he's not gonna go out and really lay into the guy, but he lays into him without expressing it. He lets it be known like that the deal is that he's bigger than this guy that he's talking to. He's not gonna rub it in his face, but he's letting it be known by other means.
Yeah.
And that mayor's fucking little prick too. I mean, man, he's such a douchebag. Like you get you meet a few different town mayors, and they're either really cool or really big douchebags in in the books. There's not really any in between. The one in Tarbean's a big douchebag. The one that he meets when he saves the two girls, that guy's real cool. And then this mayor's a big douchebag. So they go to both extremes. There's not really one shown that's just kind of middle of the road type of guy.
Yeah, it's funny the way these the shitty mayors are, where they kind of do the littlest amount to get. It's exactly what you'd expect from these guys in a position like that, where they're kind of doing the littlest amount to not be cordial or to not like do what would make sense in the moment, but then at the same time, just getting in the way, and just trying to limit any interactions between groups. Yeah, these guys suck. They suck.
Yeah. One little part in the chapter is a relevant part to the whole book, but I'll read it here. It's say perhaps that my mother was a noble before she was a trooper. She told me my father had lured her away from a miserable, dreary hell with sweet music and sweeter words. I could only assume she meant 3 Crossings, where we went to visit relatives when I was very young once. Fitz, like when you go through the books, probably not the first time, but here on this reread, like does that did that stick out to you, or is it just another part of the chapter you just read through?
No, just another part of the chapter that you're talking about him talking about his mom.
Yeah, that's good. Then I mean, because I'm going to go through. It does play a role. There's a little bit of hidden meaning in that you can dig out, but it's going to play into on the next episode. There's a big overarching theory that I'm going to go through, and there'll be a good opportunity to kind of use that and tie it in. But there is relevance to her being a noble and leaving that life, but beyond more the underlying theory, one of the cool aspects that I always think of is that Kvothe knows he's the son of a noble, and he goes around, and when people shit on him for being the Rue, and they got their nose up because they're nobles, like Kvothe never at all brings that up. Like, hey, my mom's a fucking noble, big fucking deal. He doesn't bring it up at all. Like, shows how little he thinks about that or even considers it. It's not even like, he doesn't even use it as a defensive mechanism to, fight back against insults of his lowly blood.
It's interesting that you say that because of the pride that he does have in being a Dimaru, like you said. The comparison, at least by the standards of the world in the way that he's perceived, where he would get acclaim for being a noble, and instead he's shit on for being a Rue, and that's what he's proud of.
Yeah, I do also like, kind of what I want in a character is he doesn't, I feel like he doesn't treat people on a surface level too much anyway. You know what I mean? Like he looks beyond, their, what do you call it? Just like their surface level, even like certain people that do have nobility, he might have a judgment about them in the sense that they have that fallback position, especially when he's at the university. They can use their name and borrow on it and stuff like that, which he does not have. But at the same time, he doesn't just look down his nose at people or judge them up front, in a real negative way, which is compelling about the character in itself and would also lend to why he wouldn't treat him. So he wouldn't espouse that, hey, my mother's a noble or I have this blood. So that fits with the character,
Yeah, and Sem's a noble, so he obviously is really good friends with him and doesn't think less of him because he's a noble. He knows he's a good person, so he doesn't care about, about whether you're, rich or poor or whatever. It's, who you are as a person.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
But those nobles then, a lot of them lean into being giant fucking douchebags.
Yeah, I was gonna say. We get a balance because he is living in the world, and we all do. Stereotypes are earned for a reason. It's from experience, but there are certain people that don't necessarily, like you said, lean into that stereotype. There's always exceptions to the rule, and it seems like he has the approach that one would wish that more people would have, which is, sort of get to know the person first, and then reserve judgment for after the fact,
I always like how when they're talking about Savoy at the bar one time, so it's the scene where Savoy leaves to go meet a girl, and they're giving him shit, and he is like, each one of you, if you had the opportunity to go out with a girl right now, you would leave in a heartbeat. And so, but then he goes buys him drinks before he heads out. They're like, I like Savoy. And he's like, yeah, I think it's Willem's like, it's like, yeah, it's like he knows he's better than us, but he doesn't hold it against us.
Yeah, that's a good, that's a nice little piece.
Yeah, you get a decent mix of the different nobles between Sem and Savoy and Ambrose and a number of them that you run across, and so you get a little bit of a taste of there's a spectrum on who they can be, even with Savoy, who's kind of a looks down his nose at people and shit. But he's not a cold-hearted asshole. He's just a little bit petulant and a little spoiled.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that there. You kind of see him get a little, a little bratty, I guess. You see it here with the mayor as well. The way he talks to Abinthy, where he's a total prick. Over the top in regards to how it is, or how he looks at people. And it's a lot of like, we're God-fearing people in these parts. It's just like they don't understand. And if it's something they don't understand, they immediately just run to defense, and don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he does the same thing. He does the same thing with the Rue. It's like, you guys got to keep it moving. This is create problems for us just because some other actors came through and people got drunk and created problems.
Probably the other big part, obviously, of the chapter is him meeting Abinthy. So you get Abinthy's fucking great.
Yeah,
I love the introduction to him, and when the guys coming at him, and he's like, I'm not trying to pass myself off as anything. The old man snapped. I'm a tinker and a peddler, and I'm more than both. I'm an arcanist, you great dithering heap of idiot. So great, like showing
Well, I love
his personality right off the bat.
I also love the mayor's response feeds right into it, where we're my point exactly. We're God-fearing people in these parts. We don't want any. So he's basically saying, I am a big fucking heap of idiot. He's just doubling down on, yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm an idiot, and I'm scared of things that I don't understand.
Yeah.
He just plays right into it in such a ridiculous way that we get to see.
Yeah, it's so stupid. Like, like, what do you know about my kind? There probably hadn't been an arcanist through these parts in 50 years. And, we like it that way. Just turn around and go back the way you came. Like, you like it that way. I've never even met one, you jackass.
Yeah, it's great, man. Well, that's what I mean by, like, it's great how he builds out the world in this way, because you're like, there's these obstinate jackasses. And they're going to be everywhere, and they're everywhere in our world as well, man. I mean, and it's so great to get the introduction to Abinthy, where you're immediately a fan of his because he's calling the dude out and pressuring and putting it right on him, and he's basically making the guy admit he's an obstinate jackass.
Yeah, it's a great interaction, and then you get little introductions to sympathy and naming. So he uses a little bit of sympathy with the lamps, it seems like, and makes them grow a little bit, and then kind of scares the constable for a second, makes him hesitate. But then once he grabs his arm and starts twisting it and trying to take him away, then you see Abinthy get pissed, and he calls the name of the wind at that point. It's like, from where I hid, I saw the Arcanist's face change from anxious to pain to angry all in a second. I saw his mouth move. A furious gust of wind came out of nowhere, as if a storm had suddenly burst with no warning. The wind struck the old man's wagon and tipped it onto two wheels before slamming back down onto four. The constable staggered and felt as if he'd been struck by the hand of God. Even where I had hid nearly 30 feet away, the wind was so strong that I was forced to take a step forward, as if I'd been pushed roughly from behind. So Kvothe gets to see real, quote unquote, real magic, because sympathy is real magic to me. But he gets to see that quote unquote real magic when he calls the name of the wind, and that's obviously, that changes his life right there. Just seeing that in person, that sets him on his mission to chase the name of the wind for the next 2 books.
Yeah, or at least to go talk to Ben, which changes his whole life, his whole trajectory. I like because I forgot about this, but Abinthy lays it on a little bit thick, where he's saying things he doesn't need to say, just scare him a little bit further. And I like where Kvothe recognizes he's using lines from Daonica, from like a famous play that he knows. So he's connecting the dots there, where he's like, oh, so, you know what I mean? It just makes it Abinthy, he's still a regular person, because he's throwing some drama into it, in which case I think that makes it, in my mind, putting myself in Kvothe's shoes, it makes it a bit more tangible. Or a bit more attainable, maybe would be the right word, where he can feel like, well, maybe I might be able to do this as well. He's a young, curious kid as well, and he has a lot of confidence that he's capable of anything, which I think that's a big part of the reason why he's also like, I got to talk to this guy. Not to sidetrack you, Tim, but that play Daonica, do we come back to it? Because the things that Abinthy is saying in that moment were interesting to me, as far as he's kind of pretending to be, a bad guy altogether, or a godlike figure. And so, anyway, it was just, do we revisit Daonica?
It comes up.
Yeah, they talk about it a number of times.
Yeah, it comes up quite a few times. It seems to be, it's a darker play. But it's not like a main subject or something. It's something that we fall back on that paints out the world a little bit, because they have these different types of plays. Some are silly, some are a little bit darker. I think he even refers to some of his experiences at the university, like certain situations where people look, they have an appearance about them to intimidate somebody or put a little bit of fear into them, and it feels like that's almost like something from Daonica. Am I here? Are you following, or does that ring true to you, Dan?
Well, I think like Daonica, if I'm not mixing up the plays, I can't, because I'm not, I didn't like look up the play to.
I was going to say we don't get to read it or anything.
But I mean, I didn't look up the mentions to it before we started, so I don't have it real fresh in my mind. But I believe like it's a story that is where like someone like Kvothe talks about it when he's at the mayor's place, and I believe the Daonica story, there was a part in there where Kvothe was worried that he was going to look like the bad guy in Daonica, and that he was going to be looked at as someone who poisoned the mayor who came there, and so he was kind of relating his predicament, as he was going to be looked at as like the false doctor. And so it seems like there's a false doctor or something that poisons people or poisons someone.
I know poison's in it because they mention that somewhere else where it's like they can use it. Like he asked for an antidote from Abinthy, and he kind of mentions that it's part of
that was from
play.
A different play. No, it was from a different play.
I thought it was from that.
It's still interesting though, because all the little things that kind of mirror the plays, mirror Kvothe's life, and on and back and forth. This kind of theme runs through where stuff mirrors. So that's why I always kind of got to feel like I need to ask, am I missing something, Dan? Is there something here? Because again, just him, saying the things he does, like Tim said, there's no wasted lines.
Yeah, it's not. So Daonica is not a major. It's not something that we go into deeply. It's a play for adults. It feels there's dark arts involved. There's an exorcism scene, I remember. There's there's things that it plays on some evil in the world, and it ends up being a subject that gets used in reference points. Like how in our world, I remember I took a class in college and they talked about Gone with the Wind a lot. And I brought it up to my professor, like, if I knew we were going to talk about Gone with the Wind so much, I would have seen the movie. And she was like, oh, did I talk about that much? I didn't even realize. It's like, you guys bring it up all the time. I haven't seen it, so I don't know what these references are. But yeah, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that people refer to a lot. And it seems to be a reference for like dark subject matter. Yeah, I think there's poison, and yeah, there's an exorcism scene, stuff like that. So I think it's just it's utilized in that way. But yeah, we don't get like scenes from it or anything.
Well, it's great anyway, the way that he puts that fear of God into the mayor and his constable just through his words, and then when it comes down to business, he's like, all right, I'm just going to call the name of the wind and scare the hell out of these guys and get them off my back.
Yeah, that's the effective thing he does, is the name of the wind scares the piss out of him. He's just laying it on a little thicker with the lines from Daonica. And what's great about it is Kvothe knows those things, and I think he even mentions like not that many people know that play. So it again, to me, it puts us in the shoes of Kvothe, because where he's narrating this part anyway. But I think it also makes it, it gives a special little twist to it, because he doesn't need to say those things. It's not part of what he's doing. You know what I mean? He's just intimidating them, and he's utilizing those words to do it. And actually, it's kind of funny because Kvothe does that later when he makes the fake pendant for the girl, who's real scared about the Chandrian coming after her. She doesn't know who the Chandrian are, but she's scared of,
being killed by whoever just killed everybody. The demon's killing her.
Yeah,
There's a demon that attacked the town, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he makes her like a charm. I don't remember what they call it. But yeah, it's
just a charm, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then she ends up like showing up to the university and all that. But yeah, it's he uses lines of Daonica when he's speaking to her just to like give a feel like he's doing something. He's putting some power into it. It's effective. So it's kind of cool that connection between this and that later scene.
Yeah, and one of the aspects that always kind of interests me is he talks about like they don't have, we've got a penny and a half, so our options are limited. And we're talking about an extremely powerful arcanist. He's traveling around by himself. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have a lot of food. Pretty much out of food. And
he's eating oats with the mules,
yeah,
the jackasses.
Yeah, and he's in a part of the world that probably hasn't seen an arcanist in 50 years. Why is he there?
It's a very good question. Yeah, what's he doing?
Why the fuck would he go there?
Yeah, why is he there of all places with all these things that he offers, with all of his abilities? He brews. There's tons of towns he could be in and making money.
And so he just happens to show up at this town, runs into Kvothe, and wheedles his way into traveling with Kvothe's troop. So that always raises like a flag in my head with Abinthy. Is like, is he there did he go purposefully to that town? Is he trying to meet up with Kvothe's troop? Maybe he could be someone that is like working for the Amyr, and they know that these guys have been, that his parents have been singing songs about the Chandrian, and so maybe that they tracked them down, and he's traveling with them to get information or for some kind of purpose. I don't know exactly, what he's doing, or it could be that he's there specifically to get close to that family and help Kvothe and train him.
Now that you mention it, yes, it seems quite... Well, what really seems suspicious is when he dips out, obviously. But, yeah, no, it's a very good point. Like, he has all these abilities. He has all these things that he's able to do. He has all this knowledge, and he's choosing to supply face paint to a traveling troupe. That's his utility at this point that he can offer. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really quite interesting that's how he's fallen. It feels like this would be someone with all these abilities. He's deciding to check himself down many levels to this state.
Well, as a quick read through, you wouldn't notice it. I mean, I didn't. He's out of food. He's out of money. He takes the job that he can get. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, my first read through, I hadn't considered it. I've always considered I've always had some suspicion, but it's not with what Dan just described. It's more when he ends up leaving and what happens after that causes you to question a bit. But yeah, I mean, this is a very valid question that Dan's bringing up. When you think all of these things he's able to do, I mean, he can make money in towns. There's so much that he can supply, yet he's just traveling with no money. So yeah, I mean, you have to. It does beg the question. Not on like you said, on a first read through, you're just accepting what's being given to you. You know what I mean? And you're rolling with it, and you like the guy. So there's you're not really suspicious of everything that you read. At least I'm not. And
he's a great, like his Kvothe's dad says, like he's the best brewer that he's ever found. Like, I mean, this dude could just go be a brewer in a nice town and make some money. Why is he traveling the roads like that with no money, with no food, with all that talent, and to a town that hasn't seen an arcanist in 50 years, that is hostile, to arcanists, without knowing what happened preceding all this? It seems odd for him to be there. And anytime there's something that odd, it raises questions in my mind about what's the real thing going on here. So I don't know. It's
really interesting.
Could just be, there could be reasonable explanation, or he just happened to be there for whatever reason, and he just happened to get involved with the crew, and he ended up like Kvothe, and he trained him, and then he meets that lady, and the lady whose husband had died, the widow, who was a brewer.
Mm-hmm.
He meets her when they go into that town, so he leaves the group right before the Chandrians show up and kill everybody. All that could be the case, that it's just coincidences, but it's a lot of coincidences, and the whole entire section with him is filled with nothing but coincidences.
Well, and especially
makes you question it.
Well, and especially if we're not told why he's where he is, why he has so little money. We're not told why. We're just told what is. But yeah, it does beg the question for sure, and additional read throughs.
I agree, and but that's pretty much all I got to say about that chapter. I don't know if you guys got anything else you want to add.
Nope, that's all I got. Okay. Chapter 9 is called Riding in the Wagon with Ben, and as the title would suggest, Kvothe is riding in the wagon with Ben. And it begins Kvothe's learning from Abinthy. And the reader is introduced to sympathy, and Ben shows Kvothe a gilder. We learn about Nax, and then over the next couple months, Ben begins formally instructing Kvothe, and they become friends. So then on to chapter 10, Alar and several stones. Abinthy teaches Kvothe about the Alar by having him believe that a rock will float upward when he drops it. Kvothe learns how to believe in 2 different things at once, and then 3, and he learns to play the game Seek the Stone, which I felt was a really interesting way to explain the Alar. It brings a whole nother dynamic to the story. Kvothe's Alar specifically.
For sure. And then before we go into jump into that stuff, at the start of chapter 9, I love these 2 chapters for one, because you get the first introduction of sympathy, and you get it. He just kind of builds the ground level, the ground floor for how sympathy works, and obviously he builds on it more and more. As you go, you learn more and more about it, and he puts more and more layers on it. But you get the basic groundwork of it, and you learn that there's what he is an arcanist, and to become an arcanist, you work your way through the arcanum at the university. You go through all the different layers, but he talks about sympathy. He's like, Kvothe says, sympathy, I interrupted as politely as possible. You'd probably call it magic, Abinthy said reluctantly. It's not really. But even knowing sympathy doesn't make you an arcanist. A true arcanist has worked his way through the arcanum at the university. But I love that, because the idea that sympathy is not magic just seems so preposterous to me. Like when Kvothe is in the woods fighting the bandit, and he's got that dead sentry's body, and he is stabbing it in the kidney and in the eye and, all over the place, and it is stabbing guys 200 yards away. Like, that's fucking magic. Yeah. That is clearly magic. The idea that that's not magic, that's just something you do. You just stab a guy in the eye and stab someone 200 yards away. It's just normal stuff.
I wonder if part of why Ben describes it as it's not really magic is what he eventually does go on to explain, in that how we're led to perceive it is that it's like physics, or it's sort of based in, real world reality. Struggling to kind of explain what.
Well, it's mechanical.
Yeah,
it's mechanical. It's and so yeah, I get that aspect of it. That it's mechanical. It's little tricks of the mind and things like that. But when it comes down to it, as far as our world's concerned, that shit ain't possible. Not with our current capabilities. That shit's not possible. And so, yeah, that's straight up magic to me. But then also he talks about like the way to tell the difference between, someone who says they're an arcanist and someone who actually is their gilder, or the Giltha or gilder. That's what I was drawing a blank on in last episode was I was looking for the word Graham, because what Kvothe makes himself when Ambrose is attacking him, and he's trying to protect himself. He doesn't know who's attacking him, and he's like getting stabbed and cold chills and hot chills and getting burned, and he's getting attacked with magic, and so he makes a gram to defend himself. And so there's grams, and then there are guilders, and guilders are what the arcanists wear after they get through the university, and a gram is part of a gilder. A gilder is just a gram plus. So that I was drawing a blank on those terms last time.
Yeah, the good thing though was when you couldn't think of it, you didn't get upset or anything. It didn't bother you at all.
No, it did not at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
you just kept rolling.
wasn't gonna let it tie me down or anything. Not letting something like that trip me up.
But before we kind of jump past it, I just want to mention real quick. Ben gets built out in this chapter as well quite a bit. We learn about his temperament, kind of how he is as a person. And I particularly like the title of the chapter, Riding in the Wagon with Ben, which ends up being a song that Kvothe writes. It's one of those songs where it's the feeling. There's a feeling. So, this is, which he tells us this is a very pivotal point in his life, but it's also extraordinarily positive. It's like a really good feeling to his experience in life and just like this relationship he had with this really kind of likable guy with no eyebrows.
Yeah. I mean, their relationship's great. Like their back and forth is good. These, like I said, like 9 and 10 are two of my favorite chapters, and then just it's very short interaction. He's not around for that long.
Yeah.
I mean, he dips out at what, like chapter like 13 or 14 or maybe 15. So yeah, he's only there for like 7 or 8 chapters.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about.
It's a lot of good stuff.
Well, I mean, that's crazy to think about because his influence is so heavy. Because I mean, he's not there long, but you never forget at least me, I never forget these chapters. I mean, it makes a very solid impression on the reader, and and it's so pivotal for Kvothe that he comes back to it a lot, and he kind of references Ben a lot in his own thoughts, and he mentions him a few times at the university and whatnot as well. And he's got the book, but yeah,
and you almost feel like the training that he gets from Ben is even more substantial than he ever gets from at the university until he starts naming.
It's definitely the backbone of everything. It sends him on his path. It's the spine that he always depends on through all his learning. It's where it all started, and it's why he gets started off on the right foot with everything that he ends up doing. He's also extraordinarily capable. But yeah, that combination, I mean, that's why when he finally gets to the university, we're jacked because we know he's going to kill it, And it wasn't so easy getting.
But and you get when he gets to the university, you get the sense of how well Ben did train him because he goes there and blows their doors off, and by that point he hasn't even seen Ben for 3 years.
Yeah, and he hasn't even practiced.
3 years later, yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah, I sometimes forget that he was out of practice for that entire period.
Yeah, but he was trained so well that once he flipped that switch back on, he was able to, he gets the masters to pay him to attend the university, and then when he gives him the hot foot, uses sympathy, still he's got massive control over it. He's able to, get raised up to adhere right off, within a day or so of being there, a couple days. So Ben obviously taught him very well. And
Kvothe is somewhat intelligent.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Well, and so
he's all right.
It's pretty gradual. Rothfuss does a really good job at sort of subtly or gradually describing that it's arcanists are different than just the way Aventhy's describing it. Some poor chill charmer or someone who just is able to keep fresh meat from rotting. Like there are people out there that it's somewhat common or understandable that people come across somebody that can do something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. But he's trying, what he's gradually doing is saying, what an arcanist is capable of is far and beyond that. And then we start moving into that, and that's how we get into sympathy. And then, so he has to gradually do that, where he's building. Abinthy is, yes, he's capable of these things, but he's also much more capable. He's very learned. He's gone through he's gone through all this. So, we have to go through that process to be able to appreciate what's being delivered here.
Yeah, and the two big things that he teaches him in chapter 10 are Alar and Heart of Stone, because those are going to be pivotal for sympathy. And Kvothe uses Heart of Stone a number of times as well. Both of them play a massive role in his magic moving forward. So, like with Alar, you have he says that's the sort of belief I want. It's called Alar, riding crop belief. When I drop this stone, it will float away, free as a bird. So Alar is basically like willpower and convincing your mind that if your mind believes something is true, then you can make it true. And, you can believe that when you drop a stone that it's going to go up. And if you have an iron heart Alar, you can convince yourself that that is true. And then you can use that in sympathy to make it true, with the sympathetic bindings, which we'll get into in the next chapter. But the Alar is the willpower of the magic. You have to have, the stronger your Alar is, the stronger your willpower, the stronger your magic will be, the harder it will be for other people to break your Alar, to defeat you, and to stop you from doing something you're trying to do with sympathy. So Alar is, it's huge. Like they say, it's the cornerstone of sympathy. And he says, if you're going to impose your will on the world, you must have control over what you believe. And so Kvothe develops a extremely strong Alar over the series. Like, especially when Ambrose is attacking him, but he doesn't know it's Ambrose. But when he's being attacked, and he has to constantly have his Alar raised to be able to defend against those attacks, he does it for so long that he comes out of it, and his Alar is strong as shit.
Well, and we get little pieces, too, where, they're showing Denna what sympathy is at the Aeolian. It's him and Will and Sem and Denna all sitting at a table, and he's just showing her real basic things, and eventually Will and Sem both try to prevent him from doing it. And then at some point, Sem's like, dude, that's just creepy, because he's breaking his mind into so many different parts that even for guys that know this stuff and know it inside and out, they're even getting appreciation for how great Kvothe's Alar is, how much stronger it is than other people's. So it's like those little...
two of them combined weren't able to overpower him.
Well, and then we get it in the classes too, but
yeah.
I love the way that they explain this, and I think they go back to it again when he's playing this game, Seek the Stone, where he hides the rock inside of his head and then breaks his mind into two, and the other guy has to go find it, the other side of his head. I just thought that was a great way to explain how he builds that Alar. And along your same lines, when he's one of the other interesting stories having to do with that, him breaking his mind, is later on when he gets in that battle with Devi, the lady that's got his that he gets the loan from, and he thinks that she's been. You might have to correct me on some stuff here, Dan, but he's trying to figure out who's messing with him, and he thinks that Devi has sold his blood or maybe his hair or something, and so he goes into her house and attacks her, so to speak, and he has to break his mind a few times and finds out pretty quick that she's got a really strong Alar too. So it brings so much. It makes it's one of my favorite parts of these books is the Alar and the breaking apart of your mind. A lot of good stuff there.
Yeah. He tried breaking his mind into like 5 or 6 parts and put 5 or 6 bindings on her, and was still not able to restrain her. And then especially once she ended up getting a better source than him with her fire, then it was over. He had no chance at that point. But yeah, that's what Seek the Stone does. You have the Alar part of magic, which is your willpower, and your strength of will is extremely important. Seek the Stone is important because that's teaching you how to split your mind into multiple pieces. So if you can split your mind into multiple pieces, you can do multiple acts of sympathy at the same time. You could, you can pick up 4 or 5 coins at once with that, by separating your mind into 5 parts and doing sympathetic bindings on all those coins, or, do 5 separate sympathetic bindings on a bowstring so that when you cut the bowstring, it snaps 5 different bows. So you can the reason he's able to do those things is because of a game like Seek the Stone. That's what it's demonstrating to you, is the importance of why you would need to break your mind into multiple parts. That's a huge part of sympathy, and it makes sense of a lot of the scenes later on when he does break his mind into other parts. You kind of got an idea why he's able to do that, what's going on. And the way he writes it, it's extremely, it's clever because it's funny. Like when he's talking about, I remember one time I looked for a stone for almost an hour before I consented to ask the other half of me where I'd hidden it, only to find out I hadn't hidden the stone at all. I'd merely been waiting to see how long I would look before giving up. Have you ever been annoyed and amused with yourself at the same time? It's an interesting feeling, to say the very least. It's a classic one.
Yeah,
classic line.
It makes me. It's made me laugh every single time. It's very rare that a book or anything can put you in a position like that as a reader, where you're just like, because you're on so many different levels. It's clever and it's amusing at the same time, but it's hard to get there. It takes a lot of work to get
insane.
there.
Yeah. It's insane too. Like the idea of tormenting yourself.
But
like and it's not only that, like you're sitting back, like mocking your own stupidity. Like, look at this moron. He's looking for some stone I didn't even hide. It's like, yeah, that's you. You're doing this to yourself.
In particular, what to me is so impressive about that is what he does in a few pages here is he starts off by mentioning botany, astronomy, psychology, anatomy, geology, chemistry. By mentioning those and then mentioning sympathy, it's separated from those things, right? So it is different, but it's on a level like those things. And then he describes what a knack is and how this is separate from a knack. So we're gradually, we're being exposed to these things, but then we're stepping away from them at the same time. So he's just building towards what this difference is. And then we go into the mind games and the memory games, and like what you guys were just talking about, those were exercises that Ben, they were like puzzles, right? Like little brain puzzles, little games that they would play, mental exercises. And he's consistently just building him into being able to utilize his mind in different ways, which was also great because we know just from these chapters that Arladin and his mother, they used to do similar things, right? Like some sort of mental exercises where they would like make up their own stories, something along those lines. I don't remember exactly, but it was something along the lines of like they used to do these mental puzzles as well.
Yeah.
So
they did with like learning lines of plays and stuff like that, kind of teaching him working his memory, his ability to memorize the plays and learn different skills and stuff like that.
So it's these building blocks that get us to that point, and then to where we can get to like that line. That's not possible without all these other building blocks that get us into the psychological space that we're in these chapters, which is so interesting because he's got to create that for us to buy what sympathy is. And then once he creates that space that we can be in, then we learn about what sympathy really is, the mechanics of it. And yes, he writes it superbly, but again, you got to set the table ahead of time, and that's what these chapters do so well.
And he does a good job of setting up that Seek the Stone game with the previous lesson where he's like, I'm going to drop this stone, believe that it's going to go up. And then once, he was demonstrating Alar. Once he was able to convince himself that was true, that's developing a iron hard Alar. But then he was like, now I want you to believe it's going to fall up and down. And so that was showing to believe two separate things. And then the next scene is, seek the stone, where I broke one part in my mind to find the stone and the other part to hide the stone. And so he does a really good job of explaining magic. He, gives us, these info dumps, and he explains them in a very entertaining way to read. It's an entertaining chapter, even though he's dropping a lot of info.
I like the way.
Speaking of,
I was just going to say, he also subtly, because what you're describing right there, there's a subtle point where, maybe it's not so subtle, but he mentions that once he finally figures it out, after all the challenging, he's getting frustrated, and he's like, he's not getting it. He's getting frustrated about it. Finally, he's like, I got it. And then he says, I went to bed late that night. I had a nosebleed and a smile of satisfaction. I held the two separate beliefs loosely in my mind and let their singing discord lull me into senselessness. So he figured it out, and he's just like, I love that short little paragraph is so great, because you can picture, I can picture moments in my youth where it's like you do figure something out. It's like your whole life from this point forward, is going to be different because of what you've learned at that point. And that's one of these moments. And he's just, it's so great, like the way that he wrote that. And then it's off and running from here. It's Heart of Stone. It's this is where he starts to play Seek the Stone. It's all from that point. But he had to go through all the frustrating, he's getting a headache. Like you said, he's got nosebleed, all these other things, but he gets it. He finally gets it, and then he never lets it go.
Could you guys talk a little bit more about what Heart of Stone is?
Yeah, that was the last part I was going to bring up here. So Heart of Stone is the third part. So you got the Alar, and then you got your breaking your mind into separate parts, and then you also have Heart of Stone. Heart of Stone is, you could think of it as like a putting your mind in a logical, emotionless state where you're not thinking with emotions or any kind of feeling like that. You're just thinking very clearly and logically, and it's almost like putting yourself in a Spock-like state.
Didn't you describe Heart of Stone as like you can go to your sister's funeral and not weep or something?
Yeah, Ben said a man who truly mastered Heart of Stone could go to his sister's funeral without ever shedding a tear. So it lets you, like you said, it lets you think clearly about whatever you wish.
It's
so
focus.
You're able to, kind of just be clear and unemotional and just think logically. So I always think of it as like kind of a Vulcan state, like Spock. It's the way I kind of imagine it in my mind, whereas Alar is your willpower, and then you have your ability to break your mind into multiple parts, to think multiple things at the same exact time. And then with Heart of Stone, that's putting your emotions aside and just being able to think clearly, which are all come and play a role pivotally, especially in the scene where he's fighting the bandits in the woods. I mean, you see Heart of Stone, how pivotal it is that he doesn't. It keeps him from panicking, from getting scared, worrying, and overthinking things. Like, he just puts himself deep into Heart of Stone, and then he just goes about his business on taking out all those guys, and he doesn't let his emotions overwhelm him.
Would I be right in saying, so like the skill itself is an extreme focus on logic and clarity? And then my second question would be, how does he practice it? Do we get to that? Or does it ever come up?
No, it doesn't really say on how he practices.
It doesn't. It's not.
It's just something that is there. He just does.
It's like a switch. He just turns it on.
Yeah, same with like spinning leaf is another one.
Yeah.
We talked about, but he just kind of puts his mind into it. I mean, he does it a number of times, like when he's up on the horns and stuff. He also, when the pressure starts to build and he starts to kind of panic a little bit, then he dips himself into Heart of Stone and he's able to kind of defend himself from there.
He gets a lot of, he utilizes it quite a bit. Where a lot of times he lowers himself into Heart of Stone before doing something, before something he's about to try to do, because of the intense focus of what it is.
But that's probably all I have to say on these chapters. I don't know if you guys.
I got a little thing. So you had mentioned you were talking about Amyr, why is he here, that type of thing, and there was something that kind of it's very, very subtle, but they're talking about Amyr and him. They're talking about their relationship and how they're sort of starting to get to know each other, and how Amyr or Kvothe is starting to ask him more and more questions. And there's a point where he's asking him about the university. He asks if they teach acting at the university. Amyr just shakes his head, slightly amused by the questions. They teach many things, but not that. And he says he looked over at Amyr, saw him watching Kvothe. His eyes danced. And then, could you teach me some of those other things? Now, it's subtle, but it seemed to me that Amyr, I know, again, it's a subtle line, but just before those lines, Amyr seemed to be listening as well in an offhand way. It made me feel like Amyr was waiting for him to ask. You know what I'm saying? Like just the suggestion that he was watching me. Like, I looked over to Amyr and saw him watching me. He doesn't really have a reason for Amyr. Like, there isn't really a reason for Amyr to be watching him. They're just talking. But watching him with his eyes danced, knowing that question's coming. That suggests that he knows that question's coming. Can you teach me some of those things? And it's like, I got him. I mean, I don't know. It feels like that's what that line said to me this time through.
Yeah, it could be.
Are you inferring that Amyr might be a vampire, Tim? Like, he's got to be invited to speak on things and to...
No, not at all. Not at all am I going the vampire route. And mainly the reason...
I just thought that might be your theory.
Well, the reason why I'm not going the vampire route is there is not a single shred to suggest that outside of what you just said.
Yeah, but you can't disprove it, though. You can't disprove it.
That's right.
So it just ends up becoming an Anne Rice novel in book 3.
Yeah, Amynth's a vampire, and Denna's a werewolf, and he's in love with a werewolf, and Amynth and her fight and kill each other. So he's very depressed about it.
So after the first 2 books are so successful, but he doesn't have a TV show or a movie yet, he just goes, all right, well, let's just do the... now I can't think of the reference, man. Well,
Twilight.
Yeah, the Twilight. Yeah, let's just go the Twilight route.
Yeah.
How do I cash in on this?
Kavothe's the girl caught in the middle between the vampire and the werewolf fighting over him.
You know what? That makes me so excited for book 3. I was on the fence about it, even finishing the podcast, but now, man, guys, 100%.
We got figured out a couple things. We got the Mario Brothers theory and the Twilight theory in this episode. So got a couple things figured out. Did a lot of good work here. But yeah, no, I do. I could totally see that he was, kind of leading Kvothe without, doing a very subtly leading Kvothe into wanting to be taught, into asking for it.
Yeah, it's funny because it's one of those things, because we're going back through these books and now, I have more of a focus of everything matters. That line definitely had not jumped out at me before, but now it most definitely did. And it does give that feeling of yes, he's leading him in. And it does, I'm now getting to the point, I'm starting to slowly be convinced that Amyr does seem to be part of maybe the Amyr, or, there's a plan here. It seems like there's a plan here that's playing out, and Amyr was placed here for a reason, and he's so pivotal. I mean, he's so important to Kavothe's existence and his his development. That it's to put it on happenstance is, yeah, that's a tough one.
It seemed just because of him dipping in and dipping out and all that kind of stuff. Like it seems it would just to put all those coincidences together. It just seemed very Rothfuss, not like him. Usually, if something makes you a little uneasy and raises questions, it's usually for a reason. It's usually there's something there.
Yeah.
So he's sneaky.
Yeah. But, I mean, it could just be that they're all coincidences and he just happened to show up and he taught him and that's it. But I'd be surprised if that's the case.
I meant to ask you, you mentioned Vulcan and Spock. Is that like a Mork and Mindy reference or what is that?
That's Seinfeld.
Oh, okay. I know Seinfeld really well.
Yeah.
I don't remember Vulcan. I remember they did the...
Not well enough.
It's in the, they had a bunch of deleted episodes. And
oh, really?
So,
and you have access to those?
It's in the extras.
On
it's
DVDs,
in the extras.
Yeah, on the DVD extras. They got whole season of Vulcans and Spock.
Is that the Wrath of Khan? The Wrath of Khan thing? Is that what, so that's also a Mork and Mindy thing?
Yeah, and Seinfeld.
No, but I mean, so Seinfeld's referencing Mork and Mindy.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Vulcan is from. That's what, yeah.
Yeah,
Spock.
Yeah, correct. 100%. Yeah, you nailed it.
I have no idea what you dorks are talking about. You guys are nerds.
All right. Did you guys have anything else on these chapters?
I had a couple just small things, but Ben grew up in Stop. You ever hear that again? Stop?
Not off the top of my head, no.
And there was a reference to the Solanad games. They mentioned the winter pageantry, the Solanad games. It was just another thing I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, I don't think I off the top of my head that's another one. I don't believe I've heard that one come up again. But obviously, I'm sure they got many different festivals throughout the year.
Speaking of Seinfeld, I always picture Uncle Leo when I hear about Abinthy not having eyebrows.
Yeah.
Calm down, sir.
Yeah. I am calm.
Oh, man. Yeah.
What do we have coming up, Dan?
Oh, he's crashing out.
We got a really good one next week. We're just gonna cover chapter 11. It's not a particularly long episode, but we're going to have we're gonna be able to, out of part of 11, we're gonna be able to go through one of the biggest theories of the book. That will tie up a lot of the things we've talked about, and some of the characters we've talked about. We'll flesh those out a lot more, and we'll go through kind of a big overarching theory, and I think one of the biggest question marks on book 3. So we're going to get to dig into that significantly, and then also we will talk more about sympathy. He's going to get his first lessons in sympathy, so we're going to be able to kind of talk about that and flesh that out a little bit. But the big one's going to be the big theory that we're going to go through.
Okay.
Right on.
Good stuff. All right. Well, come on back, killers, and join us next time.
All right. We'll see you later.
Yep.